Oh, there it goes. There it goes. There we go. There we go. All right, fixed it. Yay! Hello, everyone, and welcome to Vtuber Talk. I'm your host, Jay, and thank you so much for joining us today. Hope you're all having a wonderful Saturday so far. For those of you who haven't been here before, Vtuber Talk is designed after classic late-night talk shows. Everything here is live, casual, and the goal is to simply have fun conversations that will entertain people who are already familiar with the guest while still being accessible for new fans. Yes, I know this is a late-night talk show happening in the middle of the day. Just deal with it. But welcome on in, Susan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. I can tell that we already have some snoozins in the chat, but for those who might not be familiar with you, if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is LZYSUSAN. I'm a panda girl VTuber. I like to drink beer. My nickname is the Beer Bear, and I usually stream a variety of things on Twitch, such as, I guess, like, my favorite go-to are, like, platformers, like, side-scrolly stuff. We have, like, watch-alongs, and, usually I have, like, a segment talking about beer and, like, drinking beer, and then we talk about it and put it on my beer tier list. If that sounds like something that interests you, you should totally check out my channel sometime.
Yeah, and if memory serves, you actually beat your record, your personal record, for fastest beer chugged recently. That, if memory serves, you actually cut, like, 1.3 seconds off of your record. That it was a significant margin.
It was awesome! Oh my gosh, I've been stuck in, like, the 7-second mark for a very, very long time, probably, like, close to a year, and I don't know what happened that day, but I, like,
you were just
basically
in the zone.
I was, and it's crazy because usually whenever I get a big chug redeem, for those of you who don't know, I have a big chug redeem on my channel. It's worth, I think, 30,000 points, but it's basically where I chug a 12-ounce can of Miller Lite, and I try to beat my fastest chug time. And right now I'm at, I think, 5.73 is my new record, so we get hype, it's a good time, you know.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be a Beer Bear stream without it.
That I was, I always make sure that I am familiar with the content of the folks I ask to be on my show, and I was already very familiar with your stuff anyways, but it just so happened that that record breaking happened in this past week or so, and just as I was prepping a couple of things that I was on your page, and I was like, oh, that's a new clip, and it says, like, oh, new record. I was like, oh, and just, it was a really hype moment. It was really cool of just that you hear, 3, 2, 1, go, and that you sort of count, and just like, all right, how long is it going to take? And then suddenly you stop and you're like, we did it!
I have not been that hype for a very long time. I usually have, like, pretty mellow vibes, we're pretty chill on my channel, but whenever you, like, make a giant milestone like that, it's hard not to celebrate,
And especially because, you never really know when that milestone is going to hit, that it's not, okay, I'm anticipating reaching this follower number, or, okay, I know I have this anniversary on the horizon, that this is just, okay, we're going to try this thing today, and will today be the day? And to be frank, 7 seconds is already a very good record, that you were already very solid, and that pushing things down from there is going to be just ever more challenging. And not only to beat the record, but to beat it by such a significant margin was very, very fun. So congratulations again on that. I'm curious.
Thank you.
You mentioned that you choose Miller Lite for that one specifically. Is there a reason that you choose that one to chug? Is it just, I'm guessing, well, I know it's lower alcohol, so certainly it's probably easier to do. Is there something that makes it go down easier, makes it easier to chug?
Yeah, so I choose Miller Lite because it's, like, super accessible. I've never had a problem finding it. Like, it's always in my local beer store. It is lower ABV. I think it's, like, 4.3% or something. Despite what some people may think when they hear Beer Bear, I like, don't generally do a ton of drinking streams, but we like to have fun. But I'm never trying to, like, get toasted on stream all the time.
Yeah.
So it's basically a way to, like, balance out, hey, let's do something fun, but, like, let's not get schwiggity-schwasted here.
Yeah, that you are very much a beer connoisseur, not for lack of a better term, a beer junkie. That you're not just out here, like you said, getting wasted on stream. That you are very much drinking responsibly, and that you have those chug redeems, but they are very expensive. It's not okay. It's not the hydrate redeem.
Yeah, truth. I have one of those too, though.
And actually, I made a point while we were talking earlier in the week to ask you for some recommendations, because I've never been a huge beer drinker. I don't mind beer, but I've just had trouble finding ones that I like. And there were a couple that I mentioned that I liked. One was Bock beers, and it was like, if you have any suggestions for ones that you think I might like given my tastes, or just some all-time favorites of yours that, I'll go out and treat myself and get something for the show. So I have here the one that, given my enjoyment of Bocks that you suggested specifically, and this is Apollinaire Salvatore Double Bock, or Doppelbock.
Woo! Heck yeah!
I was able to find that. You also suggested a wasn't a Czech.
Czech dark lager.
Yes. And I think the one I wound up getting wasn't actually a Czech dark lager, but it was a Czech lager, and it was quite good. It was very, light, pretty inoffensive, but very easy to drink. That it was, I need to actually double check the exact brand, but it was owned by the Czech Republic.
Okay. Did it have a green label on it? Do you remember?
One second, I could step away for a second. One second. I'm going to step away for just a moment and actually find it, because I still have that. 1 second.
My guess is it's going to be Pilsner Urquell, because that is like one of the most commonly found lager types in like the States. It's just a very popular beer. But hey everyone, welcome in! It's good to see you all. I hope you're having a nice Saturday so far. Cerveza. Not that. Different.
I found it. It was a Czech var.
Oh, a Czech var. Cool. I was thinking Pilsner Urquell, because that's like one of the most popular Czech beers in the States. I was actually gonna recommend that as well. If you like the Czech beers, I don't personally like it. I can talk about that later, but I know a lot of people really like the flavor, because I'll just talk about it now. A lot of people really like the flavor of Czech beers. A lot of people say that Czech beers are like the best brewed beers in the world. I don't necessarily agree with that, because I like my German beers, but they are quite nice. The only thing I do not like about them is that they usually have this buttery popcorn flavor to them, which some people love. And it's like purposely done, because technically that buttery popcorn flavor is technically an off flavor in beer. We call it diacetyl, and diacetyl is basically this component that is found on grain, and you get rid of it by I'm thinking of DMS. Diacetyl is usually a yeast related issue, poor fermentation, poor yeast health, things like that, and it creates this off flavor that you never really want in your beer. But Pilsner Urquell and a lot of Czech lagers purposely put that flavor in their beer, because it's just like a traditional style for them.
Now, I opened preemptively the Doppelbock, and it's foaming. That is actually rising out of the bottle. I was going to wait, but I'm having to actually just sort of sip off the foam. So, Prost. So, I'm not going to be chugging this, obviously, but I'm going to try the Doppelbock.
Yeah, I'll crack open one too. I have a local beer from a local brewery. It is a lime lager, so crack that open. It's real nice and refreshing. Prost!
Yeah. I'm glad I glanced over, because it was like, as you were talking, I was like, okay, I'm just going to, open the bottle now, and that once you're done, that we drink it, but then I notice, oh gosh, it's foaming over. I need to do this, otherwise my desk is going to suddenly have foam all over it.
Oh no!
It's like, I didn't shake the bottle or anything, obviously, but I cannot remember ever opening a beer, like a bottled beer, that foamed that much naturally. Unfortunately, it was slow. It wasn't like, shake a soda and open it to just going everywhere, but it was just, slowly but surely rising, and I noticed it popping out of the top of the bottle. I was like, oh, that's different.
I'm wondering, so one of the things that could attribute to that is, like, the carbonation level of the beer. And Doppelbocks, like, are generally not super carbonated. Like, if you think about, like, drinking a Miller Lite, for example, that usually has more carbonation to it than, like, this, like, Doppelbock, like, darker style beer. I'm trying to remember, like, what the basic guideline for Doppelbock carb is. But my guess is it is a higher carbed beer that you're drinking, which would cause that to do it. The other thing that could attribute to that, and like this is usually more typical with like fruited sours. So beware anyone who's drinking a fruited sour. If you keep it too long, then and like not in ideal conditions, so like in a hot car or like even at room temperature, sometimes the fruit, because there's always like a little bit of residual yeast in all beer, and like the extra fruit adds food to that yeast, so the yeast are actually still fermenting in the packaged bottle or can, and like in a lot of cases they will explode.
Oh my! I've never
I
had
know,
that
right?
happen, fortunately, and that. I bought these literally yesterday, and they've been in the refrigerator, both at the store and then at my place. But yeah, it's fascinating that even now that it's continuing to just very, very slowly have this layer of foam rising. But but it's very good. And that I remember the first time that I had a bock was actually at a place called Hofbrauhaus, which is a chain restaurant, but it is a German beer house. And it just so happened to be their beer of the month. It was their Maibock, which is literally May Bock for the month of May, which is when I was there. And that it was the first time that I had tried a beer and actively said, oh, I like this. Because, like I said, I'm very adventurous when it comes to food and drink. That if you give me a reasonable assurance that trying it will not cause me bodily harm, I will try anything once. That I might not try it a second time, but even then, sometimes my sort of rule of thumb is, okay, if it's been 5 years since I've tried something, I'll probably try it again. That even things, if I really didn't like it, unless it was something like a visceral reaction. Fortunately, I'm not allergic to any food, so I'm not really worried when it comes to that. But that I just like trying new things, and I know that palates change over time, and that there are certain things, coffee is certainly, I sort of see as the stereotypical example of people's evolving palates, that usually when people are younger that they do not like the taste of coffee. I am certainly up there. But that, as you age, things about your taste buds change, and that over time it has gone for me to be palatable to actively enjoying that. I'm still not a big coffee drinker, but that, if I'm at a place that I know serves good coffee, that I'll order something and I'll enjoy it. Is there anything in terms of your own taste that you've found that has evolved over the years?
I like that you mentioned that you're like an adventurous eater. You like to try new things, because I'm the same way. Unless like I'm totally grossed out by like a concept, I'll probably try anything once. And feel you on the coffee. Like, I never liked coffee. I am an avid coffee drinker now. Like, I have to have my black cup of coffee in the morning. Nothing in it. Just want that caffeine. I like the taste a lot. I like that bitterness to it. But whenever I was first kind of adapting and getting into coffee, I put like a crap ton of creamer in it, like vanilla creamer and like probably sugar, and like made it real sweet, and then like slowly weaned from there. So I would say like coffee is there for me. And honestly, surprisingly enough, beer. I didn't like the first beer I ever drank. I was like, this is weird. I'd rather be drinking something like I enjoy more. But then as time went on, I tried new things. I was in college whenever I kind of got turned on to beer and everything. So it was like around me at like parties. I knew a couple of people who were like really into the craft beer scene at that time and like would invite me to beer festivals that were local to where I went to school. And that kind of like opened my eyes to, hey, beer isn't just lagers.
It's not just Miller Lite.
It's not just Miller Lite. Exactly. There's so many different styles. Anything, there's like something for everyone, I like to say. And I know a lot of people will come in and be like, I don't know how you can drink beer. It tastes like piss to me. And I'm always just like, I don't know what you're drinking, but like, that's not all beer. There's so many varieties, like IPAs, versus like a stout, for example. Like, you could not have like 2 more different beers. And that's why I always tell people to like, hey, if it's not for you, I totally get it. But like, you should always expand your horizons, try new things, and see what you like out there.
Yeah. That for me as well, the first time I had beer, that it was, not total revulsion, but just, okay, this is kind of bitter, tastes weird, not exactly something that I'm eager to have on my palate, and that I've never had alcohol for the purpose of being drunk or feeling drunk. That part of me being an adventurous eater and drinker is that, I recognize alcohol and, all the variations therein have very unique flavors that you just aren't going to get in other food and drink. And that is the appeal to me. And the first several I had was just like, do not care for this. Just not awful. How could anyone enjoy this? But just, if I'm going to be spending good money for something, I'd rather have it be something that I enjoy more. And so I floated a lot more towards ciders in the beginning because, they're sweeter, that they taste like juice. But then after having a couple ciders, I sort of realized, well, wait a minute. I'm not drinking this for the alcohol. If I wanted this taste, I would just buy juice. It's cheaper.
Yeah.
So I stopped drinking ciders most of the time. But that I continued to sort of just poke around, and that the way I wound up with the Maibach that one time was literally just, when I would go to places, I would ask the server, what do you suggest? I don't like anything that is extremely bitter past that, whatever. And, that was, like I mentioned, the beer of the month there. So sort of, I assumed the go-to of what the servers are supposed to recommend, but got lucky on that one.
Ah, heck yeah. But I mean, like, if you're in a beer place like Hofbrauhaus and you're like, I just don't know, like, always ask the bartender or your server, because they're gonna know those beers really well.
Yeah.
And just like, because like a lot of people will come on my stream and be like, Susan, what beer do you recommend for me? And it's always like, well, that's a really hard question.
That's a big question.
Yeah, because it's like, what? And then like I usually follow up with, well, what do you usually like to eat and drink? Like, do you prefer sweeter things, savory things? And then like that's a good platform to go off of, because like different beers, like we talked about earlier, have so many, like there's so many different styles out there that, you could love like super sweet things, into which case I'd be like, try a dessert stout, try like a fruited sour, something like that. Versus someone who's like, I just like heartier, like more savory stuff, and then I'd probably tell them, go for a stout, go for a porter, go for something like a little darker, a little chewier. So it kind of like depends. Everyone's palate is different. It's always just like, have like something to tell your waitress, your bartender, whenever you're asking for a recommendation. They'll usually steer you in the right direction. Mm-hmm.
For you, you mentioned that you didn't care for beer the first couple times you tried it. Do you recall sort of the eye-opening experience, the one that you had of just, oh, I do like this one?
That's a really good question. I would probably say, yeah, I would. So I think what really got me into like more craft beer is, well, two situations. So I'd say the beer that kind of opened my eyes, made me realize there's so many different varieties out there, and that beer can taste like super fruity or like super bitter depending on what it is. That beer for me was Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, and it is like it's a pretty common beer. It is also what made me start loving IPAs and pale ales and more bitter beers, and like start really diving into like different hop profiles and what they bring to the table. And that kind of like inspired me to like start going and looking for new styles, trying new things. What really got me in gear, at the time, there was this local brewery close to my house, and I became like really good friends with the owners. They were super sweet. Have like these long, in-depth conversations about like beer and beer styles, and the brewer and owner of that establishment is actually the person who like helped me get started in my own brewing endeavors.
Ooh.
Yeah, so I'm very thankful to them, and all that I have learned from them, and just like every time I went there, I'd like try something new, and it was always fantastic. So I would say like those were the two instances, and Sierra Nevada Pale Ale specifically was like the beer that kind of like got me into this whole world.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask that you're using a lot of jargon, and some of these terms, most of these terms, I'm at least mildly familiar with. But then also you were talking some of heat profiles, and I was going to ask, sort of, where did you get this education? Was this something that you just picked up along the way? Did you ever take a class? Did you look stuff up online? But it sounds like that bartender wound up being sort of your teacher, if I'm understanding correctly.
Kind of. So actually, this person wasn't a bartender, they were a brewer.
Brewer.
So so they made all the beer, and like I was just kind of fascinated with the whole concept of making beer and like the process, and I was like, I really want to like try making my own beer. So they recommended this book for me called, I think it's Paulner's first beer book. Here, let me look it up real quick in case anyone
Hashtag
is
not sponsored.
interested.
Hashtag please sponsor Susan.
Yeah, please. Paulner's homebrew. That's not it. I'll find it though. Paulner's is the name of a brewery, so I'm confusing the last name of the author with the beer. Let's see.
Paulaner is the brand of beer that you suggested to me for the Doppelbock. It's the one I'm drinking.
Yeah. Oh, maybe it's Palmer. Maybe that's...
Oh, Palmer. Yeah.
Yeah, Palmer might be. Yeah, so it's anyone who's like out there who's like, I want to learn more about beer, the process, home brewing. There's this book by John Palmer. I kind of feel like it is everyone's introduction to home brewing. It's like very, very good. It's just called How to Brew, Everything You Need to Know to Brew a Great Beer Every Time by John Palmer. It was like my first book that like I read front to back, learned so many, like, as you said before, like jargon terms, the whole process of brewing a beer. And then I just started from like square one, where it was like, I went out, I bought like a 10-gallon pot that like just sits on your stove. And I got like, there are these pre-made beer kits that you can buy. And they have like, you just pick the style of beer you want to make. So I think the very first beer I ever brewed was a grapefruit IPA. So it came with the amount of malts that I needed, the yeast that I needed, and the hops that I needed. All I needed to do was provide the water. And then it had like a nice step-by-step kind of recipe guideline that told me, this is what you do first. Okay, after this part, this is what you need to do next. And it was really, really good. I'll say, like, I drank that beer, it turned out great, it fermented, like, it was beer, so that's always, like, very exciting when you make something that is drinkable. And then, like, from there, I was like, well, how can I make this better? Like, what is up with my process, my ingredients, like, what can I do to, like, make a better beer? And that's kind of how it all started and how it progressed.
Mm. I feel like one of the fun things about the VTubing industry and the content creation industry at large that we've been seeing over the past couple years is the different types of collabs that people are able to do in terms of like sort of brand collabs, not just content creation collabs, but we have people who've done different things with energy drinks. We have people who have done, obviously you have the go-to for apparel and different things, but I think we're about to enter into an age where as VTubing becomes more and more mainstream and more companies realize the value of working with different content creators, VTuber and otherwise, I think we're going to start seeing that, there have always been, sports players who do, ads for different companies, for different beers and whatnot, and that I'm curious to see when and where we're going to see our first VTuber beer ad, but also just crossovers of, could there be a LZYSUSAN beer flavor of just, some custom brewing, whether it be a small brewery, something larger and corporate. But if, imagine that a company came to you and said, we want to work with you and, make the LZYSUSAN beer. What would you make?
That's awesome. Wow, that would be an awesome endeavor and like such a cool goal to reach for, because I've personally, since I do homebrew and make my own beer, I've always like kind of asked myself this question, like if I was gonna make a beer like after like myself, what would I want?
Yeah.
And I always come back to, I want it to be a rice lager. Asahi Super Dry, Sapporo, Kirin, those are like beers that are all very near and dear to my heart that I love drinking. Asahi Super Dry is my favorite beer of all time.
That's the other one I have beside me.
Yes. Oh, I'm glad you were able to get some. I don't know if you've had it before.
I've had Sapporo before, and I've had a couple other Japanese beers. I've never had Asahi Super Dry specifically, but I've seen it around, and fortunately, it is as far as Japanese beers go, one of the better known ones, one of the relatively broadly distributed ones. So when I went out shopping yesterday, I was able to find it.
Heck yeah, I love that. I'm glad you were able to pick it up. Curious to hear what your thoughts on it, if you are able to get to it during our stream today.
I think we'll get there.
Heck yeah. And I guess the reason why, going back to your question, why I would pick a rice lager as like the style of LZYSUSAN beer is because that's one of my favorite styles. I love lagers, and especially what makes a rice lager, other than like there is rice in it.
There is rice in it.
There is rice in it. The other thing that like makes it a rice lager is like the dryness that is just like usually uncomparable in other beers. Like usually if you get a lager or like even like a pilsner, which is a type of lager, they're a little more hoppier. Like they're very light bodied. A rice lager is the same way, but you just like get this crisp dryness that is just like, to me, so refreshing, and just I could reach for one of those like on any occasion, like wintertime, hot and sunny, while I'm eating a meal. Like it's like a perfect go-to. So that would definitely be the style I would gravitate towards if I ever made, or if anyone wanted to make a LZYSUSAN beer.
And that is kind of interesting because obviously you mentioned that you really love German beers. You are essentially modeled after a German barmaid. So to find that more Japanese style beers wound up being your favorite is sort of an interesting difference. And obviously, you still love all these other types of beers, but it's just sort of intriguing to find that that was the one that has stuck out to you. And when it comes to jargon, like I mentioned, I understand most of it. That I understand the difference between a light versus a dark. I understand the term hoppy and different things. I've heard the term dry said plenty of times when discussing beer, and it's just one that I continue to have difficulty wrapping my brain around, because obviously in terms of literal evaluation, it's an oxymoron because beer's liquid.
Right.
So I've always had difficulty understanding what does it mean for a beer to be dry.
And that's that's a really good question. Just for tasting profiles in general. So whenever I was getting into beer, was doing all this research, talking to all these beer nerds, and one of the key factors, the characteristics of a beer that make a beer the style that it is, make it in the category that is, you look for different characteristics of it. Taste being one of them, bitterness, maltiness, dryness, the color of the beer, the aroma of the beer, and the body of the beer. So carbonation is usually what makes the body of the beer. And dryness, so when I first started getting into a lot of beer, I struggled with trying to place the flavors of the beer I was tasting, because like you said, you're getting all these words from other people flying around, and you're yeah, how is this beer dry? So to me, it's always you find a component in that beer that you associate with dryness. For me, it's it kind of is bubbly and sits on your tongue, and it doesn't necessarily dry your mouth out, but it it's kind of thirst quenching, but also you want more of it. So the dryness, if this is making sense to me, is just it is just a more hearty flavor, and it just kind of sits on your tongue, and it's there, and it is usually a lighter beer as well, so it's very drinkable. And to me, that is what dryness is. I'm sure other people will tell you, I consider this to be dryness, what I'm looking for whenever I'm drinking a beer. But I always think that's a good place to start. Drink a beer, ask yourself, what am I tasting? What is the mouthfeel of this beer? Is it thick? Is it thin? Is there a lot of carbonation to it? What's the color of it? And then, write down what you get from that beer. And then it's always nice to go online and compare it to I'm gonna throw this out here. It's called the Beer Judge Certification Program, or BJCP, and those are kind of the guidelines on what makes a beer a certain style. These are just people who are certified beer tasters, and just from traditions when styles are born, have the set of guidelines, this is what makes a rice lager a rice lager. This is what makes an IPA an IPA. And you can go on their website and search any style, and it will tell you, you should be experiencing this when you're drinking this beer. And that's kind of a nice platform to go off of, and then compare what you are getting from the beer versus what essentially professional beer tasters say you should be getting.
Do you have that certification / do you have any interest in getting that certification if you don't already have it?
Yeah, so it was someone's asking beer sommelier, and it's actually Cicerone. I misspelled that, Cicerone. And I have been interested in getting it. So I actually brew beer professionally, and as a brewer, you are generally considered the first tier beer cicerone without even having to take the test, just because you brew beer.
Yeah, that if you're making it, that it sort of comes along with the territory, that as a creator in the space, that you instantly have some level of authority, because, well, if you're making it, you need to know something.
Yeah, 100%. You need to know what makes a beer, what makes this style this style. There's a lot of cool things you can do to experiment, but at the end of the day, breweries are there to sell beer and to sell good beer, otherwise people aren't going to buy it. So it's kind of just like you kind of need to know the ins and outs of like the process, the styles. So I am technically like a level 1 Cicerone, just based on like my education of beer and being a brewer. But I would like consider taking higher examinations so that I could like be a higher Cicerone one day. I think that's like pretty cool. A lot of times though, it's like as you get higher and higher in the levels, it's a lot of like beer and food pairings. So yeah, it's similar to like sommeliers. I think more people are familiar with like sommeliers, which are wine tasters, like professional wine tasters. But it's very similar where it's just like, you know, if you're eating like, you know, a hamburger or something, like what beer would complement that meal the most? And that's kind of, as you climb the ranks of Cicerone, you kind of gravitate more towards that. And I'm like, not, like, that's not exactly like what I'm aiming for, but as far as things just like learning about traditional styles, learning more about the history of beer, even like glassware that you're like traditionally supposed to serve the beer in. Those are the things that like I kind of gravitate towards more.
So I'm very much enjoying this. I hope you don't mind that we're sort of sticking with beer a bit. That part of the fun for me for doing this show is being able to talk with people about their interests, and that certainly I've not been able to in 142 episodes talk beer to this extent with anybody. So this is something that is very fun and special for me. That surprise, surprise, the talk show host loves getting people to go on about their hyperfixations.
Nah, I appreciate it. I'll nerd out about beer like all day long, so it doesn't bother me at all. I'm glad you're enjoying it too, and I hope everyone watching is also enjoying learning a little bit about beer.
But I guess one thing I also know is you enjoy traveling, that you do actually travel a fair bit for work and also just for pleasure. And that my guess is when you are traveling about that is, you know, sort of top down. As a traveler, is there something that you look to do when you're traveling places? That my guess is probably somewhere along the line you do make a point to sample local beers, but you know, as a traveler, in addition to all that, is there anything that you really look to do when you're planning a trip?
So you hit the nail on the head. I definitely am like always looking for like cool places to go that are like known for their beers, whether it is like within the United States or like certain countries. That is always like something I find super fascinating because like cultures are different. Beer is different per culture. Different, even like taking a smaller look at like the United States, depending on where you live, there's different styles that are more popular in certain areas. Like, for example, West Coast IPA, which was born on the West Coast and is a clear beer, but like very hoppy and bitter, versus an East Coast or a hazy IPA, which was born on the East Coast and is hazy and not clear, and usually has like, instead of a piney profile that like a lot of West Coasts have, it is more like tropical fruit forward. So I love traveling to try new beers. I actually had such an amazing trip this past September. It was like a once-in-a-lifetime trip for like any beer lover, but I got to go to Oktoberfest in Germany, and
the big one.
It was so great. It was hype. I tried so many amazing German beers there, just breweries that will like import to us, or export to us rather, and like actually being able to drink that beer fresh at those breweries is, oh, it's so good. It's hard to beat. Like that's just like primo style, primo tasting beer right there. So I was like really excited to travel around Germany, you know, like eat new foods, drink new beers, experience the culture. But I guess, like, to answer your question, outside of picking places to travel to based on beer, I guess just, like, interest level. I've always had a huge love for, like, Japanese culture. It kind of is why I watch so much anime, and gravitate towards that kind of stuff. It's just always, like Eastern culture has always fascinated me because it is so different from Western culture and like what I know. And when I was still in high school, I had a very close friend who was half Japanese and actually got to go to Japan with her, like meet her family that still lives over there, check out Tokyo. It was such an eye-opening experience to me because it was the first time I had ever traveled so far away from home, and the first time I was in a different country. And it was like this giant culture shock for me because I was just like, this is so different than what I'm used to. Like everything is different. It's almost like the world I know was like flipped and turned upside down. And just like things I had never experienced or thought about before, I was like experiencing that. I was getting all of these awesome adventures, all these eye-opening experiences. It was absolutely fantastic. And like those kind of countries, Thailand is like huge on my list to go to one day. Japan always holds a very special place in my heart. Love to visit China, in like Vietnam, South Korea, places like that like are very high on my list, just because of that fascination with their culture. And I guess like, I don't know, just like places that seem fun. I'm also very into like hiking and camping, and whenever I go to new places, I always try to take an opportunity to find hiking trails, like basically experience new things that aren't your typical, hey, I'm going to this major city to like eat good food and drink and like see all the skyscrapers. Like I'm gonna escape to nature for a little bit and see like the landscapes, like the natural beauty that this country has to offer. The trees are different. If there's a river, like the color of the water might be different. The animals that are like around the forest area or wherever are probably different. And it's just great experiences for me, and something I've always just kind of also thought about whenever I pick a place to travel to.
Yeah, and Japan certainly has its fair share of just the scenic hiking, and obviously it's not just Mount Fuji, that there's lots of incredible mountain ranges, there's good hiking trails. I was actually talking with a friend just a week ago who was visiting Japan, and he was talking about him and a friend going up a hiking trail, and that they actually had an incident where the sign said peak for this particular small mountain, and where there was going to be a temple was 1.5 kilometers or something to that effect. That not that bad a walk, and that was the absolute distance. That was not the distance of the path. So they have to go up this winding path for one part, but then there's also, you mentioned that they basically didn't have to quite scale a wall, but that it was an extraordinarily steep climb, and that while it was indeed technically 1.5 kilometers from the point of that sign, that it was not a kilometer and a half's worth of exertion, shall we say.
Yeah, it sounds like it was way more vertical than they were anticipating. Probably didn't bring their rock climbing shoes for that.
No, he also mentioned that there was just this little old lady who just sort of brisked by them, that, she wasn't running, but she was just, walking at this very nice pace. She'd obviously been up this path many, many times before, and she was like, oh, hello, you youngsters, bye. And they were like, we're not in bad shape, we're relatively fit, but oh no.
I love that. That's just I don't know. When you get familiar with like a terrain, it's just like, oh yeah, I got this. I could do this in my sleep. And then it's like difficult for other people. So then it's just like, how's this little old lady like beating me? Like, oh my gosh. Yeah, exactly. Oh, that sounds super fun though.
For whatever level of specificity you are comfortable with, were there any particular paths or, trails that you've been on in really any country, Japan or otherwise, that were, particularly breathtaking or that you had memorable experiences on?
I'd probably say like in like terms of Japan, I find that country super interesting because you can be in the middle of a city, like a big city, like, we'll take Tokyo, for example, in like one of the districts like Harajuku, bustling streets, super crowded, and then you like walk over a bridge, and then you're just kind of like in this serene, amazing area, and you forget you're in the city. Like, Japan does a really great job of that, because they have so many temples, so many shrines, that are, like, pretty easily accessible, I would say, to a lot of people. So a lot of the hiking that I did, last time I was there, that was, like, very memorable for me, was I was in Kyoto, and there is, like, a small town with, like, this temple, essentially, a monk temple, and I had met someone at like a convention. I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to Japan, and they were like, I was just there. This is like, these are some of the things I did that I really enjoyed, and like sent me a whole list, and I was like, started doing all this research, and the one that piqued my interest the most was this like temple climb to the top of a mountain called, it's called Karamadera, and what originally got me so interested in hiking up to this temple was the fact that there was a hot spring in this town that you could go soak in afterwards. So I was like, oh, that's primo. Like, I'm gonna hike up this mountain,
and then you sort
see
of have
like
that reward at the end.
Oh, 100%. It was awesome. Like, I would love to go back and do that. It was just awesome because it was like the sun, when I got there, like the sun was going down, and it was like not very crowded. I'm not even really sure if I should have been on the climb up at that point, because I don't know if they like close it down, but like, yeah, I no one said anything to me because I even got to the top, and like, monks still live on top of that hill, in like this temple area, and like, I don't know if he was just like going about his day or what, but I ran into a monk, and he just kind of like bowed at me, and like, we didn't really say anything because he knew I was a foreigner, but like, just kind of was like, it's cool, enjoy like the beauty around you and like the setting sun. So it was just like a really beautiful experience to get to watch the sunset from on top of this mountain that like I had climbed up, and like took me probably like an hour to do, just taking my time. So it was just such a great experience, and then like going to the little hot spring afterwards, and it's like such a small town. It's like not super touristy or popular. So I was like the only one in this hot spring. It was fantastic. Would highly recommend people go to Karamadera in Kyoto if you're ever in Japan. So I'd probably say that is like the most memorable hike for me on my traveling journeys.
I asked that question half selfishly because I myself am actually planning what will be my first trip to Japan. Hopefully what will be near the end of this year, that
Heck yeah.
Finally getting around to renewing my passport and everything, and just sort of setting aside the dates that I've wanted to go for ages, and had been initially planning, when it was in 2019 or so. I was like, okay, 2020, that seems to be the year that I'll, have the time to travel. And then that didn't happen.
And the world shut down.
Yep. So it's sort of been the situation since then of finding the time that I'm in a fortunate enough position where, I have the finances set aside for it, that I'm expecting to, I want it to be a good trip, and that I'm not going to skimp out too much, but at the same time, it's actually a pretty good time to visit Japan if you're from the U.S. because the USD to yen rate right now is very good. And,
Oh, yeah.
So that's very nice, and I've been basically slowly but surely accumulating different opinions from people, different suggestions, and just figuring out, okay, how do I want to do this? Because I plan it's going to be at least 2 weeks. I'm trying to decide if it's going to be 2, 3, or 4 weeks at this point.
Go for as long as you can.
Yeah.
That's my recommendation. If you're gonna fly all the way there, try to stay as long as possible.
Yeah. For your trip to Germany for Oktoberfest, how long was that trip? Was it? I would imagine it probably wasn't too short. So were you there for how many weeks?
So I was there for probably 2 weeks. I was predominantly in Germany, traveling to different areas, but I also went to Prague in Czechia for the beer. It's nice in Europe because they actually have train systems, which we kind of are lacking in the States.
Yeah, that you can get trains in the U.S. Definitely more so on the eastern half of the country than the west half. But those train systems are not nearly as fast and convenient as ones that you will get in Europe or Japan. That you can get an Amtrak from DC to Chicago or whatever, and you'll stop at a number of cities in between it, but it's not as robust or as efficient as what you will get in these other countries.
Nah, I agree 100%, and I always find it really funny because anytime I'm in have been to Europe, and I'm just sometimes people come up and talk to you, or you go and talk to other people, they always go, "Oh, you're from the United States. Well, what do you think of our country? Oh, have you used the train system? What do you think of that?" And I got asked that while I was in Germany, and I was like, "I love it. This is great. I wish we had this in the United States." And people who live there are always like, "Really? We think it's shit." And it's just and I'm just like, "Oh no, you have it though." I get that trains might be delayed, and
New Yorkers always complain about the subway, but in terms of public transit in the U.S., the subway in New York is about as good as it gets. That I'm trying to remember, what was it? I think it was Boston T.
Boston's really good too.
Boston's public transit was one of the best I've ever experienced. And I've been fortunate enough to travel around a lot of the United States. I've only been outside of the country a couple of times, and never outside of North America. I've been to Mexico a few times. Have not been to... Actually, I haven't been to Canada, have I? But that I've been to... At this point, I think it is over half of the states. For varying amounts of time. Usually it's only for a couple of days to a week. And admittedly, I'm not always able to actually enjoy the city that I'm in. That usually when I'm there, it's for business or other types of things, that I will be there and I will get to the airport. I will go to my hotel, and I will be at either the hotel, a venue, a very specific building for business, or restaurants. Occasionally, on a very, very rare occasion, I will go to a small concert, not a stadium concert or anything, but a smaller one at a local venue. But that there are a lot of times that, okay, I'm in the state I've never been to before, and that I'm here for 6 days, and that I spend it all in a couple of buildings, and it's, you're still able to get the basics of a city's flavor just from being around it and from being around the locals, and even the local staff at a hotel or at other buildings that you interact with can end up giving you sort of a high-level profile of a region or a city or a state. But there are indeed many places that I've been to that I feel like I've been to, but I haven't been to,
I feel that. Yeah, it's so different traveling for work versus like pleasure. I'm the same way. Like anytime I've had to travel for work, it's always like, all right, here's my hotel. You know, ask the people at the front desk what are like good places to go eat around here. Go to whatever it is I'm there to do, and like unless I am able to set like a day or two aside to enjoy the new area for myself, it's the same concept, just like hotel area that I'm like there to be. And it's kind of a bummer because it's just like you're there to work, it's taxing, but it's also like, oh, I just want to like go have fun. I want to go explore this place, and I have that wanderlust in me, so I'm always just like, all right, I'll just have to make note if I really like this place to come back one day on my own time.
Yeah. Are there any places that you've been to that sort of are in that category of you've been there but you haven't experienced the place that you want to make a point to go back to?
Yeah, I would. Ooh, that's a good one because I feel like a lot of places I've already done that. I guess like Maine, like Portland, Maine, was one that I would just love to go back there. I was up there for work, and it was such a beautiful state. It's like so cool, but I did not get to explore it nearly as much as I would like. So then like I decided to go back there and like actually like for myself and you know, experience the beauty that's like Acadia National Park, and eat like all the good food that they have, because they're like super well known for their lobsters and stuff. So many great breweries, and it's just like a really cool place. As far as like places that I've been for work but like have never like gone back there that I would like to, I can't really say there is a place. Maybe Los Angeles. I was just there. I did have a little free time to myself to like try out some breweries, some good restaurants, but like not nearly to the extent that I would have liked to. So that would be cool to go back and see.
Yeah, I've been to LA a number of times, and that I've always been there for an event or something to that effect. Something I've mentioned on the show several times, I don't think it actually came up in any of our previous conversations, is that I do a lot of stuff with events and conventions, and that that, you know, I've been to Anime Expo many times, so I'll fly into LAX and, you know, get to the hotel and, like I mentioned, get to a venue and do a thing, and that I've been there enough times that I'm actually familiar with downtown LA decently well for that, you know, sort of mile and a half radius. And at the same time, I cannot say that I've truly experienced LA, that I've not done the touristy things. I've not been to, you know, the Grammy Museum or anything else, that I haven't been inside what was the Staples Center, what is now the Crypto.com Arena for any games, despite being within, you know, a quarter mile of it for many days. And that, you know, I've been to San Francisco a number of times, haven't really actually seen the Golden Gate Bridge other than in the distance, never been to Hollywood, stuff like that. And that, for me, LA occupies this really interesting sort of middle ground that in some ways are like, you know, I feel like I should see it, but at the same time, for me, I don't know if I really care to experience LA. And this is not a slight to LA of just, you know, that if for the types of things that I normally enjoy, I don't know if the touristy parts of LA are things that I would want to make a dedicated trip for. I can understand why some others would. That obviously, you know, LA, Hollywood, there's so much there that maybe if I could get like movie studio tours would interest me. That I don't care about the
that'd be
celebrity
cool.
stuff. You know, surprise, surprise. The talk show host is more interested in the back end production of movies than the actors. That I love and respect actors, and you know there are ones that whose performances I point to, and it's like that's amazing. But you know, I'm not gonna go on one of those tours where you sort of trail around Beverly Hills and it's like, oh, that is such and such's house, and this is the diner where such and such had a bunch of meals when they were down on their luck before they had their big break. That stuff does not interest me at all. But
No, I feel ya.
To see a studio and see the back end of this is where such and such film was filmed, or this is the sound stage for this game show or something. That type of stuff, that would interest me.
No, I feel you on that. Like, obviously, I like to do a lot of hiking and stuff, so that's what I, like, usually want to do, and, like, that's a great way to see the city and the natural beauty of it. LA does have, like, quite a bit of hiking, and I'd love to go back and do that. But in terms of, like, going to places in LA, it's like I don't really want to do like the Star Walk. I don't want to go to Beverly Hills. I'm kind of like you, where it's like I want to go to like the diner that like Pulp Fiction was like shot in or something.
Yeah.
Like that's super fun, and like there's so many iconic places like that where it's just like, oh yeah, I remember this scene, and then you're like it's almost like you're immersed in that movie, which is awesome.
Yeah. Are there any places that you have not been to for work or otherwise that you hope to get to?
Oh yeah, 100%. So high on my list is Denver, Colorado.
Ooh, that's very specific. Why Denver, Colorado?
Just because going back to me, it's a really great place for beer. There's a lot of really great breweries there. And there's a lot of like hiking trails around the city.
Well, it is the Mile High City.
Exactly. So I'm kind of like, I'd love to check that out. I would love to go to South Korea one day. That would be really cool. I listen to this podcast called Trash Taste. And
I'm familiar with Trash Taste.
Oh yeah, they're great. Good group of dudes. But always like super informative about anime. And I believe it was Garnt and I don't know if it was Joey or Connor. I want to say Connor. I think they went to South Korea like a couple months ago, and they all live over in Japan as foreigners.
Yeah.
Except Joey, because he's like half Japanese. So he kind of grew up in Japan. But one of the things, especially like when Connor talks and like talks about, being, from England and England? More specific. Anyway, British.
I think he's Welsh?
Is he Welsh? Okay.
I could be wrong.
Yeah, no, that sounds right.
UK
that sounds
at large.
right to me.
He is British, yes.
I love when he talks about when he first started living in Japan and like wanted to go to bars and stuff. It's like kind of hard to get into like a classic typical bar that you'd sit down, like have a conversation, because a lot of people will like, oh, you probably don't speak Japanese, and they kind of like don't necessarily want you to come into their bar. It's just like a little bit more difficult to like get into that area to like an extent where I think a lot of people would like to, just because of, the conversation. Japanese is so different from English. Not everyone speaks English, so that's like kind of difficult. But he was talking about being in South Korea and how the drinking culture there is just like so much more like open, and it's so fun. People are like, get in here, like you need a soju shot, like eat this Korean barbecue. Like they're a little more welcoming in that respect. So that is something like I would really like to check out. As far as, we have a question that says, does altitude affect beer taste? So it doesn't. The biggest thing is like it would affect the brewing process, in terms of like temperature and carbonation levels. But as far as beer goes, it doesn't like necessarily affect the taste. So, but it does have an effect on the beer.
Yeah, neat. So going back to Denver, I guess. So I did not actually know that Denver had a significant beer culture. So that's always one of the interesting things for me of just learning. I feel like if you look hard enough, every city has a significant beer culture, and that the growth and spread of craft brewing and just, brewing techniques at large has been such a cool thing. And I'm sure it's been there for longer than I've been aware of it, but it's been sort of something that I've just learned as time goes on, that seeing how, as you mentioned, each region really has their own styles, and that, if you trace things back historically, there are always these very interesting and logical explanations for why things wound up the way they were. That you mentioned things like on the East Coast ending up sometimes having more fruit, and that would make sense, especially if you go down to like Florida or something, which has always had larger fruit production or just fruit imports being part of their economy, and that it makes a lot of sense why that would naturally flow into other things such as brewing. What is Denver known for? Is there something that they have specifically in terms of style that is iconic to the area?
I wouldn't necessarily say style. New Belgium, I believe, was founded in Denver, Colorado, and then eventually opened up a second place in Asheville, North Carolina. So just kind of like a lot of big breweries like kind of got their start there. Blue Moon Brewing Company's out that way.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's kind of like there are a lot of like nice craft microbreweries, but also like a few macro breweries that kind of like started out there. A lot of times, if you are looking at like these larger cities, where a lot of breweries have kind of like settled or like really popped off, they're usually like due to the water that is in that area. So like
Hardcore Hunter in the chat mentions, I think any place with access to mountain spring water is known for alcohol, and again, a very logical explanation.
100%. Like, if you think about it, not to get like too technical, but like water is a major ingredient in beer.
No way!
Yeah. So you're basically hydrating, right? Duh. But like if you kind of like look at the, like I said, I won't get too technical, but if you kind of look at water profiles around the world, there are specifically different salts in the water that are like specific to each region. So, for example, like West Coast has a lot of gypsum in their water. It's just a salt. It like provides kind of like I guess like a crispier kind of texture to the water, versus like East Coast has more calcium chloride in their water, which is another salt, and that is usually kind of like makes water like fuller, if you will. So one of the things when people are like, I really want to open a brewery, they'll look at like the water chemistry in their area, like send out a water profile, what's in my water, and then they can tweak their water profile by adding more salts to it, if they know their baseline, to get like certain bodies in the beer. So like hazy IPAs are generally like a fuller, not thick beer, but like fuller, heavier beer a lot of the time, and that's usually because of the high calcium chloride levels that have been in the water. But one of the like most interesting things, I think anyway, is, well, what do you do if you're a big brewery like Sierra Nevada, for example? They have two breweries, like giant breweries. One is in California, San Francisco. I'm kind of blanking on that. I think it's San Francisco. And then their other one, they opened a second brewery on the East Coast in Asheville, North Carolina. Now, if you like think about the water profiles we were just talking about, how different West Coast and East Coast water profiles are, and you think like Sierra Nevada is a pretty well-known brewery, the quality is like standard, you're gonna open like a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, and it's gonna taste the same every time. Like the consistency is dead on. So how do you do that if you have this water that is so different from like two different areas in the world?
You have to treat it, I assume.
Yep, you have to treat it. They are such a big brewery that they have their own lab where they literally are sending like water samples back and forth once a week to make sure that like it is being consistent with the original brewery's water chemistry profile.
Yeah.
So it like gets real in depth on this kind of stuff, but
there's so
it's
much
kinda...
chemistry in brewing. There's so much chemistry in food that
yeah.
Even if you're just cooking, steaks, that everything for the exact temperatures, the amount of time that you're cooking a steak, the environment in which you're cooking a steak. Are you using charcoal? Are you using wood? Are you using a grill? That the amount of science and chemistry involved with food and beverages is so fascinating to me, and I have only the most rudimentary of understandings that I'm on that bell curve where I'm far enough along to know how little I know. And
do you cook a lot then?
No, not really. I'm a very lazy cook that I will do very basic stuff, but that, I've picked up things here and there of, basic jargon, basic understanding of how things work. And like I said, I know enough to know that I know very little.
I gotcha. Are you familiar with, he's like a pretty popular TV chef, something Brown. I don't know.
Alton Brown?
Alton Brown, yeah. He's really into like the chemistry and like food science part of food and cooking.
Yeah.
I always like find him really fascinating to watch and like hear what he has to say.
Yeah, I watched a lot of Food Network when I was very little. Don't watch as much nowadays. I don't watch as much TV because I haven't had cable or anything like that for ages. That companies always send me mailers of like, add cable to your internet package. Nope, I'm quite fine with internet alone. Thank you very much. Because I'm, when I'm watching things that it's usually either anime or VTubers. And it's like, I almost feel I've been dancing around anime a little bit because I know you're into anime and I know that once we get there, that I could just, sink an hour real easy on that.
I feel that. Yeah. I was like, oh, that's going to be so easy to talk about. There's just so much, there's just so much anime.
But I guess to sort of wrap up things there, that that it makes sense that they would be doing those types of tests, and you mentioned they do them weekly. And that makes sense too, because water profiles change over time, that water flows. That's what it does. And that, different things from just, weather and what it can do to the environment and, rain, just these systems travel, and that can then cause differences in the chemical composition of these, whether it's a lake, a river, what have you, but that it will change things. So you do need to constantly be updating, and that if you have your standard source, in this case, in Denver or wherever, and then in Asheville, North Carolina, which when you named that particular state, it was like, okay, I know North Carolina, I don't know much about it. I've been there a number of times, but I certainly don't know it as a stereotypical place of you go to for its crystal clear waters. I'm sure they have some fine rivers and whatnot, but it's not the standard, but that they update, basically, like you said, that they treat their water there and that they have that standard. So no matter where the drink is brewed, bottled, canned, what have you, that you are going to get that consistency, and that they're able to just scientifically replicate that. And that's so cool. That science is really neat, and
it is.
There's so much that goes into stuff. And whether it's someone who's just brewing at home or these massive, large-scale corporate operations, that people are taking the time, effort, and knowledge to make all this stuff happen, that all these innovations, especially I feel like over the past 20 years, again, with the boom of craft brewing, that it's so cool to see all these different things. And that I've never actually been to a beer festival, but I want to, just to try all the things. Again, me being an adventurous eater drinker, that it seems like a very fun experience for somebody like me. So
I would highly recommend it. Like, just look, like, most places will have like their local festival. If you're willing to travel, like, there's some really good ones. Like, I'd say in Maine, anywhere in Asheville, North Carolina. I want to say like Knoxville, Tennessee has some pretty good ones. California usually does. So does like Denver, Colorado. And even like Seattle, Washington, I would say have some pretty good ones. But it's a good time. It's like literally show up, you pay for your ticket. You get like a little sampler glass, and you go around to each stall, look and see like what breweries have brought, and then like they'll pour you a little sample, and if you really like it, you can go back and like get another. Sometimes, if they're like, you really like this beer, they'll just like top you off kind of thing. And it's a great way to like experience like so many new beers, new breweries. It's a great way to try things without like having to commit paying like $15 for a 6-pack or whatever, of like, I don't know if I'm gonna like this or not. But it also, as fun and awesome as it is, it also like gives you palate fatigue like real quick, because you're trying all these beers, and you're just like, oh my gosh, my taste buds, I can't even taste this anymore.
I know that when it comes to smelling things, that coffee grounds, that is considered sort of a standard palate cleanser. That if you're going around smelling different types of tea, that they'll usually have coffee nearby for you to smell in between things. Is there a standard palate cleanser when sampling beers? Is it just water, or is there something perhaps not so plain that it just chemically is able to clear the tongue?
So there's nothing like, water is usually like the go-to, but also like this, I think this is more of a me thing, but Kolsch, it's a style of beer I find to be like a very nice palate cleanser, because it's like a nice, refreshing, lighter beer. It kind of like resets my taste buds. I think that's like more of a me thing. It's funny you mentioned coffee, because coffee actually, like, in terms of drinking it, is like awful before drinking a beer, because it like there's something in coffee that is going to like skew your taste buds, so you're not going to be able to pick up the flavors of the
tongue.
But like you said, like as an aroma thing, because like one of the things we do is like we smell hops to see if we like really like a crop, if it's like just like pick up different aromas that those hops are giving off. Like, is it more tropical fruit? Is it more citrusy? Is it more piney? But between hops, to get like the full aroma profile, you want to like smell coffee in between it.
Like I mentioned, I've worked a number of conventions. It's just something I enjoy doing. That I've always, one angle I've considered is, all right, do I want to work a beer festival someday? Maybe that's how I sort of finally get off my butt and get an excuse to go there, even for a local one. And it's just something that, unfortunately, I've never been able to make the time for, but it's in the back of my mind of, okay, I need to get around to this eventually.
Right? It is like, most festivals are always looking for volunteers. If you volunteer, it's usually like, okay, you get into the festival for free, obviously. They usually give you your own sampler glass, and a lot of the times, if there's enough staff, people will come around and like tag you out so you can go enjoy the beer festival as well. It is a really nice it's a really nice environment, and like if you have the free time and that's something that interests you, I would say it's a great way to just like get into craft beer, meet some cool people, drink some good beer, and like hang out.
I hope to one day see the Lazy Susan brand beer booth at a beer festival.
Yeah, here's hoping. That would be awesome. But you know, small baby steps. I actually, is it cool if I take like a 5-minute break just to like fill my water up, use the bathroom, all that good stuff?
Go right ahead.
Cool.
And
thank you.
In the meantime, I have missed a number of follows, so thank you to Aroxum X Pro, GT Man 199, Wolf Dwarf, Raptolos 7789, and Demir Infiltrator. Good name. I understand that, Magic Gathering player, so I get that reference. Haha. So thank you all so much for the follows. Welcome on in. Hopefully you all are enjoying the show so far. This is actually episode 142 of Vtuber Talk. I do these shows approximately once a week, and don't really have an actual consistent schedule. I do my best to schedule around my guests, and this is what I do. And as a matter of fact, I have a very rare 2-show weekend lined up, this one being the first, that tomorrow afternoon I will be talking with Mint Costella. So I'm actually, first off, I'm realizing that I have not given Susan a shout out yet today, so I want to do that. Because if for some crazy reason you aren't already following her, please be sure to do so. And that it's, like I mentioned, 142 episodes, and that part of the fun in this for me is just every person, every VTuber has their own stories, their own interests, and while there are certainly some overlaps, that when Susan gets back, I expect that we'll be talking anime finally. And like I said, I've sort of been putting that one off because I know that if I started with that, there's a risk that we could just go the whole show. And since I don't get to talk beer with people ever, really, I wanted to make sure that we had a good, full conversation on that before getting around to other things. But I do know that she really enjoys anime a lot, which I do, so that's going to be a lot of fun. And that hopefully you all stick around for that. And obviously, if you have any favorite shows or have any hot takes, that anime is obviously not only just a big thing for a lot of folks, but it's certainly an influence for the VTubing space as a whole. And yes, as Train Rule says, exploring the galaxy full of VTubers, that's the fun for me. That this channel, if you haven't noticed, that there is no subscribe button next to that follow button if you care to click it. And that's I've left the channel unmonetized by choice. That I'm fortunate enough to be in a financial position where content creation is not something I am looking to make a living off of. And that if you all are going to be spending money, I would encourage you to subscribe to your favorite VTubers, whether it be my guest on a given day, folks that you're already following, but that there's so many amazing people in this space, and that some have aspirations of full-time content creation, some already do, and others not, but that it's always nice to support where you can, but at the same time, certainly just tuning in, following, lurking, that lurkers make the world go around. Statistically speaking, I think some, on average 70-80% of folks are lurkers, so for those lurkers out there, thank you so much for stopping by. And Susan, welcome on back.
Thanks! I'm back. Yeah. Everything look okay on your end?
Yes.
Okay.
No worries.
Cool.
We definitely didn't have a case of arson. I've put the fire out there. There's no evidence. You can't prove anything.
What? What did I miss?
Don't worry. You're fine. Everything's fine. Everything.
Why is everything smoking?
Everything is fine, right, chat?
Oh my
right?
gosh. Oh my gosh. Why is everything smoking? Oh my gosh. What? Hey. I see those looks. I see those looks.
It's fine. Distraction. Anime. There we go. Anime. Yes. Haha. You mentioned to me that your favorite anime is Konosuba, and that means that you are in luck, because I think is it next season or is it summer that we get season 3?
I think it's summer. I think it's summer. I'm not 100%. Yeah, I'm so pumped we're getting another season of that. There's actually like a couple anime that are getting like a season 3 that I'm like pretty pumped for.
Mm-hmm.
Konosuba, Laid Back Camp.
Well, especially for someone who enjoys, hiking and camping, Laid Back Camp is just, that's the show, that's the anime for it.
Oh, 100%. Like, oh my gosh, it's just... It was really funny, though, because when that anime aired, it inspired a lot of people who had never gone camping before in Japan to go camping. But, like, they had no idea what they were doing, and, like, there were, like...
no.
There were, like, a lot of people who, like, didn't have the proper equipment, but mostly, like, a lot of fires started happening because they didn't know proper fire safety protocols. Like, you need to put this fire out, like, all the way, not just, like, have it smolder. So that was kind of, like, this crazy thing that happened, because, all these anime lovers were like, I could do that. I could be comfy.
Go camping now. Yay!
Yeah.
And just you see that for a lot of things, whether it's anime, other shows, just popular culture in general affects culture, and that you do see that in Japan and other places around the world, that especially when you have something more niche becoming popular, that those various industries, for lack of a better term, end up seeing a spike in terms of sales or activity. And I do remember hearing that following the first season of Laid Back Camp, that different parks and mountains in Japan were suddenly seeing just actual 200, 300, 400% growth in number of visitors in the months immediately following that airing. And that's just really cool of, okay, something that is niche has been brought to the public eye enough to cause that type of interest, and that, it must have been really nice, but also possibly a bit unexpected and alarming, because they didn't develop that show to galvanize tourism to mountains and camping sites and such. So it has, I always wonder, what is it like for the people who are working these places that just, oh wow, we just had like a really good weekend. Wow, there's just a lot of people. That's nice. Wow, this weekend was really busy too.
Yeah.
Wow, what's going on?
Right.
Something
what
has
was going through
happened.
their heads?
Why? And that, how do they eventually find out? Because you expect after a time, whether it's just people visiting and that there's conversations, why'd you decide to visit? Oh, I saw this anime. Oh, that's nice. And that they then start hearing that answer 20 times, however many times in a given day, and they realize, oh, this is the cause.
right. And it's like, oh, I put 2 and 2 together now. Mm-hmm. It all makes sense. It's all because of anime.
But it's really neat how anime is able to actually do that, and just there's so much anime being made nowadays that you get these more niche things that may have been made 15, 20 years ago, but not necessarily would have seen the time of day.
Right? Oh my gosh, right?
Just a Laid Back Camp, for those of you who haven't seen. Also, I think the Japanese title is Yuru Camp. I forget which ones, depending, different sites will list it differently sometimes, but it's exactly as relaxing as it sounds. It's very nice.
Cute girls doing cute things. Mm-hmm. It's great.
Yes.
It's cute girls camping.
Yeah. And obviously, Konosuba, at this point, I would call it a modern classic, that you had the first season, which sort of took the world by storm. The second season, it didn't flop. It was more of just, it was a continuation. And it has been, gosh, how long has it been since season 2? Like 7 years, 8 years?
It's been a hot minute. They did release the movie.
That's right. Yeah, the Crimson and the Megumi spin-off anime.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I forgot. I forgot. So I'm not a Megumi fangirl. I much prefer Aqua because she's like more comical. So I did not watch all of the Megumi.
Yeah, I think I watched the first 2-3 episodes of it, and
Same.
It was a bit one note for my taste.
Yeah, it was like cute, but I was
fine,
like, eh.
But also the fact that it was a prequel, and prequels are always sort of difficult for me as a viewer, because you obviously know how it ends somehow. Of which the main character survives, bare minimum. So stakes in certain battles are always going to feel lessened, and that you then are really, really relying on the overall plot or the overall just story, whether it be the drama, the gags, to sort of carry it, because certain things are going to be inherently known. And that one wasn't bad, but it didn't quite sink its hooks into me. But
Feel that. Same.
Classic Konosuba was just it's one of those shows that I look at and say, it didn't necessarily innovate anything, but it is one of those shows that takes all of its tropes and executes on them so well that it knows what it's doing, and it takes these things that you can say, okay, I've seen isekai before, I've seen magic before, I've seen these tropes before, but they just do them so well.
Right? It's just like fun and dumb. And like it just like doesn't take itself too seriously, but it's like very well executed.
Yeah. And that just, if you're looking for a good classic comedy anime, that season 1 of Konosuba is such an it's a very accessible place to start, that there's nothing really complex about it, that it is just it's these 4 idiots. It's these 4 idiots being idiots together, and there's a handful of supporting cast that you get to, but by and large, it's pretty contained to that core cast, and that they're all it's just very silly witty writing. Yeah,
and it's just like they're on this adventure, like trying to defeat the demon lord, and it's just like their journey to do that. It's just, like I said, it's fun, it's dumb, the characters are like crazy. I like the characters a lot in Konosuba because like they all have a flaw.
Yes, like these are very much. I don't want to say they're all bad people, but they're not good people.
Yeah, they're like, you can kind of identify with them more versus like, I don't know, like Sword Art Online. You're just like, okay, Kirito's perfect. Like he's always gonna win. He's gonna get the girl. Like it's just like, to me, that's not like as entertaining because I know like what's gonna happen. Konosuba, I'm just like, all right, what are these idiots gonna get into, like, based on their flaws?
Because they don't have standards, you don't know what they're going to do.
100%. And it's so fun to watch. It's so fun. Like, how did we get here?
Yeah, and just, like I said, it executes on a lot of things that you recognize, that you mentioned Demon Lord, that you have the classics of, different monsters and slimes and whatnot, the classic city, and that they use sort of rudimentary versions of stats that ultimately don't actually mean anything, that it's not a complex magic system or lore, that this is just, it doesn't even really need to be an isekai, while it is technically, in terms of, all right, this is how Kazuma got here, that after the opening couple of episodes, once he's really acclimated, him being from another world is no longer relevant or really even brought up in the plot. That if you were to start watching the show in episode 3 or 4 and nobody told you that he wasn't just born in this world, you could very easily think that this is not an isekai technically.
Yeah, I mean, like, I kind of always forget about it, like, even when we were chatting about, like, what are, like, some genres that I like to watch, and it's like, I like isekai, but, like, mostly because of Konosuba. And it's like, oh, yeah, that is an isekai technically, but like, you kind of forget that as you start watching it.
Yeah, and usually I find that to be my favorite types of isekai, the ones that generally don't need to be isekai. That I understand why isekai is a big thing, and that part of it is just as a viewer, especially at the start, that if you can say, okay, this person is new in this world, that gives you a very easy excuse for exposition. Because, well, they don't know about the world, so we gotta explain what's going on in this world to this person who was not born here, and therefore they're able to explain it to the viewer who is not familiar with this world, because it is the start of the show or book or manga or what have you, and that it creates a much more natural opportunity for that sort of required storytelling in these fantasy worlds, whereas you might have to shoehorn them in a bit more in non-isekai, and that it's in some ways, in my opinion, become less of a genre and more of a writing technique.
That's a good way of putting it. I like that.
That some certainly continue to lean on it and have the characters' unfamiliarity with the world, or the fact that they are, for lack of a better term, a foreigner, be more central to the plot. That sometimes that is the crux of it, of okay, they're either trying to get back to their world, or that they were summoned here accidentally or on purpose, and that them being for another world means that they have some important trait or otherwise are relevant to the plot. But then there's also just as many that, similar to Konosuba, you have that start, and that afterwards it doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other isekais that have sort of stood out for you? Because goodness knows it has become, at least in the past decade or so, I feel one of the more prevalent genres in anime.
Yeah, so one that might be, like, not as well known, that I, like, this came out several years ago, but it's called Isekai Izakaya, and it's basically about, like, this izakaya restaurant, that is, like, basically isekai'd into, like, this, it's an izakaya restaurant from Japan that got isekai'd into, like, this more magical world. So the people who are living in this magical world have, like, never really experienced, like, traditional Japanese food, what an izakaya environment is like, kind of restaurant. So that one was, like, a fun watch. I also like to watch a lot of anime that, like, revolves around food and stuff, not just Food Wars, because, like, just like everyone geeks out about, like, Studio Ghibli, and every time someone's eating something, it, like, looks like the most delicious thing ever. I feel like that in most anime. Like, food just looks amazing, and it's like, I want to eat that. So I'd recommend Isekai Izakaya as well, if you're looking for, like, a fun, lighthearted, it's an isekai, but you kind of forget it's an isekai because it's more about the food.
Yeah. I haven't seen that one, but one that seems relatively similar. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Restaurant to Another World.
Oh, I haven't watched that, but I have heard of it. So it probably is, like, very similar concept.
Yeah, most of that show is, it's just vignettes, that it's more about the patrons than it is about the owner or employee at the restaurant. That the first episode is sort of establishing how they met, but from there that it's sort of actually almost Western serialized, in the sense that it's usually 2 stories per episode, and that you will just have these different characters. And the whole concept is that the door to this restaurant, which is, it's an izakaya, that it will appear once a week in these various places in the world, and that it is normally like you mentioned, just normal izakaya in Japan, and that is how, by day, the owner is able to support it, and that they're able to charge less or even sometimes give away food once a week, when to the real world, this restaurant is just closed on Saturdays, because that is the day that the doors appear in these various other worlds, and that you have people, you get their very efficiently told stories that establish these characters and different associations with food. That some of these people end up coming to this restaurant and being able to have a meal or a dish that they had not had since childhood, or are able to share a meal with somebody who's very different from them, or in some cases, like I said, there's no real overarching plot, so this isn't a major spoiler, but there's one short story about 2 people from different sort of parallel worlds who met this one time in this izakaya and continue to come specifically to see each other, because this is the bridge to their worlds, and that them sharing a meal and a drink is the time that they were able to spend together. And that it's very efficient storytelling, and it's very nice, very comfy. and that it sort of spans the range of emotions, for lack of a better term. That some of them are going to be a bit more sappy, maybe make you tear up a bit. Some of them are heartwarming. Some of them are just, oh, that's funny, that's cool. There's one sequence of just 3 different people. You don't necessarily get their backstories, but they're all arguing over what is the proper way to make or eat or season this meal. And it's just sort of this mini comedy routine that they go through for about 10 minutes, and it's very tightly written. So for somebody who enjoys food and drink, I think Restaurant to Another World would definitely be one for you to check out.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I'm putting that on my list to watch. That sounds great. It sounds like a very similar concept to Izakaya. Since we're still talking about food, like one of the newer ones I have not watched, I'm not current with this, but it's called Dungeon Meshi.
Oh, yeah.
Where,
yeah. Meshi, Delicious Dungeon.
I've heard. Yeah, I've like I said, I'm not current in it yet, but it like the couple episodes I have watched seem like super fun. Just like let's make meals from these monsters that we find while we're like in these caves and stuff. So that's been like a super fun watch.
Yeah, I learned about that one probably a year and a half-ish ago because another guest of mine, Captain Dandyfloss, was on the show, and when anime and manga came up, she mentioned, this is my favorite manga of all time. It's going to be getting an anime. It's being done by Studio Trigger. So I sort of noted it down a year ahead, and so when it finally actually started broadcasting a couple of months ago, because it's still airing now, that I'd been looking forward to it, and it's very fun. You mentioned familiarity with Trash Taste, so I'm not sure how familiar you are with other sort of, anime and anime adjacent VTubers, but are you familiar with ProZD?
Oh yeah.
He is one of the major characters that he's in the main 4 of the main cast. So and
that's awesome.
And he uses one of his deeper voices that does not sound like his inherently, but once you know it's him, you hear it and it's like, oh gosh, that is him. And it's very cool to see him get such a major role. And he's had a couple certainly over the years that it's been fun seeing the growth of. You okay?
Oh yeah, I'm drinking water. Sorry.
Oh, okay, that's it.
Was I freaking out?
Yeah, sorry. The model just blipped for a moment. I was like, hopefully
it's all good.
Connection or something didn't break. But it's been cool to see folks like the Trash Taste Boys who have been in this community for years and years and years. And when they finally started the Trash Taste podcast, I remember seeing it. I was like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. The 3 of them have interacted before, and they're all pretty big names that if you were to at the time sort of go through the Anitubers, as it were, you'd say, yeah, those are 3 of the bigger names. That's neat. And I don't think anybody, including them, expected their podcast to take off as it has.
Right, but they're so entertaining.
Yeah.
They have so many good things to talk about, and it's just really, really fun. I'm like happy that it has popped off so much.
No, it's been incredible, and that now they're going to conventions, and that they've been touring, and it's neat seeing nerds be able to make what they're doing into their careers, and that they're continuing to do their own thing. That I think Joey has his own clothing brand. That Connor has been spinning off and doing a lot of other content that you see him regularly collabing with, like Ludwig and a bunch of other folks. He hosted his big charity auction, which was super cool. He fell into VTubing. That one of the big sort of lore things, I guess, of Trash Taste podcast is one of those early episodes when Connor now infamously said, I don't get VTubers, I don't understand the appeal. And it was Joey and Garnt who was like, oh yeah, like we've been getting into Whole Live and such, and they're kind of cool. And Connor was just not getting it. And you look at him now and just, he met Iron Mouse and the rest is history.
Yeah, right? It like came full circle. Also, something cool Connor's done, he's like gotten together with like a pretty famous Japanese fashion designer, and he just released a suit. Yeah, it's pretty cool. and it's like pretty reasonably priced, I think. Like it's not like tailored to the person buying it, like you have to do that yourself.
Yeah.
But I think it's like $170, which is
Really?
like not bad for a suit.
Oh,
yeah,
it's
pretty.
I thought it was like 500 or something. Maybe I need to
Oh nah,
it's
like reasonable.
I bought myself a nice suit. Ooh.
Oh, maybe get the Connor suit. It looks very dapper. And super comfortable.
And that's one of the things that I was talking about, different collaborations and types of merch, effectively, that you see t-shirts and hoodies all the time. I want more suits. I want more people to, be able to design higher end pieces or more unique pieces or design beers, things like that. And the fact that he was able to actually make a suit is so cool that I hope we see more of that.
Oh, I agree. That stuff also fascinates me, where it's like, it's just like take things you're interested in, kind of like off-keel things that you don't see so much in merch, and like make it happen.
Trebcell in chat mentions that there's also Damien from Smosh and the actress who played Nami in the live-action One Piece, and that's correct. Yeah, that the main character in Dungeon Meshi is Nami from One Piece. And,
I didn't realize that. Heck yeah.
Yeah, and like super exciting for her because prior to One Piece, that she was a very open, very vocal One Piece fan, and that was one of the big things for her casting, that it wasn't just okay, she seems right for the role, and goodness knows they got the casting right even for folks who weren't necessarily super familiar, but she was, and that was a big thing. And like one of the saddest parts, one of the few sad things about the release of live action One Piece is that it happened during the actors' strike, so the actors weren't able to hype it up, they weren't able to celebrate things. And then, when the strike finally ended, that they were all going on social media. It's like, oh my gosh, finally I can talk about it. It was so cool. I'm so glad everybody enjoyed it, even though I know this, this aired 2.5 months ago or whatever.
It was super well done. Like, if you think about all the like live action anime adaptations that have happened, like this is definitely one of the better ones that has like come about. I have finished that, and like it was like a fun watch. I like that they took some like creative freedom in certain parts, but like still remain true to the story.
Yeah.
Oh, and all the actors and actresses were like, they were absolutely incredible for their roles. Like the whole Straw Hat crew, like you couldn't have found like better actors and actresses.
Yeah, that Oda had famously said that he wasn't sure if there was anybody other than Iñaki Godoy who could play Luffy, and after seeing that show, I understand that, you expect sort of a creator or a casting director to say, oh, yes, of course, the people that we cast are the best for this role. They're the only ones that could do this role. And sometimes that's more true than others, and this was one where I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah. Like, hit the nail on the head, for sure. Like, so good.
Yeah. And it was a very fun watch for me because I mentioned when we spoke earlier in the week that I've seen some of One Piece, the anime, but I never really tried to climb that particular mountain. I saw some of the early episodes back when 4Kids had the original English dub. And so I saw up through... I saw it like through the Captain Kuro Black Cat Pirate arc and snippets of the Arlong Park arc, but that's really where it ends for me. And so I knew going into the live action most of what was going to happen. That I knew Glahador was Captain Kuro. I knew about Nami being with the Arlong crew and whatnot. So those particular twists I was expecting, and I knew about the very famous scene with her, stabbing her tattoo and everything. So I was sort of watching with knowing mind but fresh eyes, because it had been so long since I'd seen those episodes anyways, and that I really enjoyed it, and that since there were some things I didn't know, I didn't realize how much Garp's character had been changed. And I know that for some of the longtime fans, they were a bit more mixed on that. Garp was one of my favorite parts of that show. I loved Garp.
Garp was fantastic, 100% I agree. just like kind of nailed it, and just I don't know, that's what I thought Garp would be like in real life.
Yeah. I didn't expect the thick Scottish accent, certainly, but at the same time, I don't know, it felt right in that he was this... He hit the duality of warm, welcoming grandfather, someone who is of significant power and authority, but cares, of just, he seems to be the shining light in this kind of questionable authority organization that is the Marines.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, he has his moments where he shows his power. He is, I don't want to say ruthless, but that he is, when somebody has done wrong, that he is able to, exercise his authority and his power and show why he is an admiral.
Yeah, and this... I don't know if they mentioned this. Am I allowed to give spoilers?
Yeah, spoilers are fine. I consider sort of statute of limitations on that long past, because certainly the source material has been out for long enough.
Cool. So he is Luffy's grandfather. So it's like, when I learned that, and like knowing Garp's character, and then knowing like Luffy's his grandson, that he trained Luffy as a kid, like just how powerful they both are, because like, Luffy's strong, and not just because of the Gum fruit, like he's got some moves, and it was because like Garp trained him growing up, and like showed like no mercy on him. It's like kind of cool to see like characteristics in Luffy that like are very, very Garp.
Yeah. That I know they moved up that reveal significantly in live action. That in the anime and the manga, that doesn't get revealed until many, many arcs later, and that Garp doesn't actually appear until many arcs later. That there is apparently some, I think it's like a chapter cover art or something, that you see that in the timeline that there is a continuity of Garp learning about the Straw Hat Pirates and having this meeting early in the timeline, but that for what we actually see in the manga and anime, he doesn't appear until I think it's like 200-ish episodes in or something. And the reveal of the familial relationship even later. But that here they broke that at like episode 4 of 8 or something. But that it still felt fun. And as someone who hadn't seen the reveal in the previous media, the reveal here was very fun, of just, Grandpa?
Grandpa? Right? It was well done. I was kind of surprised they took that creative freedom and like introduced him so early as like Luffy's grandfather, but I thought it was like executed really, really well, and I thought like they did a super nice job with it.
Yeah, I think it's because they wanted to give sort of a thread to bind the season, because you have it's sort of not villain of the week, but villain of the arc. That you have Gladiador, and that once you're past that it then goes to Arlong, and that you have ARKHAND Morgan in the beginning, but that otherwise those 4 arcs that they spend basically 2 of the 8 episodes on each end up feeling a bit disjointed. So I think they wrote Garp in to be that more consistent presence outside of the Straw Hat crew.
Yeah, I would... That's a really good point, because it's like... It's also like introducing this idea, because like as you learn more about the Marines, the more you're like, are they really the good guys? But like Garp like pretty much holds true to like his beliefs, and like what he's doing is right. And you're like, okay, there are some like good eggs in the Marines.
Yeah.
It's not like all corruption, but also like there's a lot of shady stuff that's happening.
Yeah. But it was a very fun watch, and I'm looking forward to the next one. Frankly, I'm just glad we got a good live action.
Same.
Because goodness knows, the track record is
Pretty abysmal.
inconsistent, shall we say, and that's putting it kindly.
Yeah, I say it's like pretty abysmal.
It's pretty bad.
Yeah, I have not watched the live action of Avatar: The Last Airbender yet, but I am like really looking forward to watching that.
I thought it was very good. That
Okay.
I wouldn't. It's difficult for me to comment on it compared to One Piece because I'm very familiar with Avatar. Seen all of the original series, seen all of Korra, love them. They're incredible.
Same, yeah.
But since I haven't seen all of One Piece, that my experience as a viewer for those two series is very different because one I walked in with no expectations or, sort of framework expectations, as I mentioned, and the other I have full knowledge and expectations. My advice to anyone watching the live-action Avatar: The Last Airbender is to go in understanding that this is someone I used the term remix. Do not expect one-to-one. There is a lot of shuffling of timeline and characters and events. It is significant. If you go in wanting it to play out in the sequence with the same people in the same places, you will not be happy at all. But if you go in saying, all right, I'm expecting it to be different, that mindset alone, I think, will allow most Avatar fans to enjoy it, because I feel for all the shuffling that they did, like, I imagine that they took this big piece of glass that is the story of Avatar: The Last Airbender, and they took a hammer to it and they shattered it into shards. And then they rearranged the shards that still created the same shape, a pretty inconsistent rectangle or whatever that the pane of glass originally was, but that the shards of glass are not exactly where they started, that they move characters and storylines to just completely different places, but they still happen, and that with relatively few exceptions, the characterizations are consistent, and the few where they aren't are logical changes of, okay, I wasn't this character. I feel like we need to have this conversation again after you've seen it, because there's a couple in particular that it's like, okay, that's very different. But
Yeah,
I can also understand why, you could write this character both ways. Of just, without giving spoilers, that there's folks that are happy-go-lucky in one that are a bit more jaded in this one. But when you think of, they've lived through the atrocities of war, it's understandable why they might not be as happy-go-lucky.
My guess is I'm thinking Aang that you're like referring to, but because like he's so goofy in the anime, but also it's like
Aang is the same. Aang.
Oh, cool, cool.
I will put Aang's casting up there with Iñaki Godoy. That I think that Iñaki Godoy is a stronger actor than Aang's actor, but I also think a significant chunk of that comes with age. I think that's just Aang's actor because Aang is a child. That he's a very, very competent actor for an actor of his age. And it's just that Godoy is able to have more depth, and I think that just comes with him being older and having more experience.
That makes total sense.
But Aang is very consistent. They did not change the character of Aang in any significant way.
So he's not Ong, right?
No, thank goodness. Oh my god. Oh.
Yeah, let's rip on that one.
At the very least, I will say, anybody who compares this adaptation to M. Night Shyamalan's movie either has not seen M. Night Shyamalan's movie, is deluding themselves, or has shut the memory away because it was so awful that they legitimately don't remember how bad that movie was.
If you forgot all about that movie and you blocked it from your mental capacity, I'm very envious of you.
Like, I understand why you would do that, but at the same time, anybody who says that this is remotely comparable to that movie like I said, either hasn't seen it or has done themselves the service of blocking it out. But it was so interesting because I noticed in that movie that they had the consistency of they changed the first vowel of every character's name, because it was Ong, Soka, Iro. It was always the vowel, and it was changed from a long sound to a short sound, which, had it been a good movie, I feel like we all would have overlooked. Had it been a good movie, we'd have been like, oh, that was a very interesting, creative choice to go for. I don't know if that's a more traditional quote-unquote pronunciation, but whatever. That's not character changing. While it was disorienting the first time I watched it, well, the only time I watched it, that, you look at that and say, had it been good, it wouldn't have mattered. But now it's the cherry on top of just this gag, this very, very bad thing of that. Who said that was okay to release? Somebody with authority had to watch that film and said, yeah, this is good, this is solid. We're ready to release.
Someone who didn't watch the actual animation.
Or someone
that would be...
Yeah, or someone who didn't watch the movie, or just said, we have our timelines, we have our release date, and this needs to go out right now.
Oh, yeah. And M. Night Shyamalan is going to bring in viewers because it's M. Night Shyamalan.
Which is also weird, because if you think about everything else that he had done before and since, he writes horror. He doesn't write children's movies.
Right. I don't really get why he decided to, take the reins on.
His children were big fans of the series. He took the project because of them, apparently.
I didn't know that. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, and that, in its own way, that was super heartwarming in the earlier parts of production, of hearing like, oh, wow, he's seen the whole series because he watched it with his kids. That's really neat. So he should be familiar with it. He should know what it's about, right?
He should, but...
Keyword should.
Yeah, like, sad. But, it happens. Like, I've never directed a movie before. I wouldn't know where to begin, but if I kind of feel pretty confident if I was in that position, I'd be like, well, I'm not going to change the names, and I'm going to try to stay true to the animation.
Yeah. Trebsell in the chat mentions one of the other, I would say, most prolific bad live-action adaptations for animation, and certainly for anime, that Dragon Ball Evolution, and that very sadly Akira Toriyama passed at the start of this month, and that was announced about a week ago, and goodness knows, that was one where I didn't watch a lot of Dragon Ball Z growing up, but as someone who is a big anime fan now, the impact of Akira Toriyama on the timeline and continuity of anime in Japan, but specifically in the West, in North America, is incalculable. Because
I would agree with that. Yeah.
That Funimation Entertainment, which is, technically now Crunchyroll, but that you were in the late 90s, early 2000s getting a very, very small number of shows being localized in the West. But that Funimation Entertainment was founded specifically to facilitate the licensing and localization of Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, because the founder of the company had an uncle that worked for Toei, and that's how he was able to get access to the rights initially. And for many, many years, that's all that Funimation did. That was the only title in their catalog, and then it was following the success of Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z that they started to license more things and eventually grow into what would be an industry powerhouse and one of, sort of 2 or 3 pillars in the industry, which would then get consumed by another. And we have Crunchyroll as the effective superpower now, but that without Funimation in the timeline, just butterfly effect of, if that doesn't happen, the proliferation of anime in the West would have it would have happened, no doubt. But
Sure.
the speed of which would have been greatly slowed. That my guess is, if Funimation, if Dragon Ball doesn't exist, or if the founder licensed some other show that sees some marginal level of success, that it sets back the growth and timeline of anime in the West anything from 5, 7, 10 years, maybe more, of just the continuity, because it happened to be one of the biggest shows of all time, and it meant that people in the West finally started to recognize anime, and that it grew the entire industry in the US and North America so quickly that you think about the conventions, you think about the different products, you think about VTubers. Like, obviously we don't have a time machine, we don't know exactly where it goes, but the impact of Akira Toriyama and Dragon Ball is just, it is enormous, and seeing and learning of his passing was very, very sad. We were fortunate to have him for as long as we did.
Right. Oh my gosh, that hit me really hard, and it's really interesting, like, learning about, like, Dragon Ball Z and how it was kind of like the introduction to anime for Westerners, because, like, I'll talk to people and it'll be like, what got you into anime? And, like, for me it was Dragon Ball Z, because it was, like, on TV. I was like, this is great. Like, I had, like, older cousins who were, like, super into it, so I'd always be like, I want to watch this too. And like, a lot of people, like, very similar stories. Like, Dragon Ball Z was, like, my first anime that, like, got me into anime, and it just really hit hard for, I think, a lot of, like, Dragon Ball Z fans when Akira Toriyama passed. I know, like, it kind of left me feeling kind of, like, definitely sad, because he was also, like, so young, in my opinion.
Yeah, he was 68? Yeah.
64 or 68. But, yeah, like, I'm just, like, especially, like, like, a lot of, like, those who grew up in Japan, they live longer lives, usually. Just
statistically speaking.
Exactly. Just because, they eat a healthier diet than a lot of people. They do a lot more, like, physical exercise, just, like, walking around, and, like, they take care of themselves a little better. It's just part of the culture. And it was, like, so sad to hear that, he had passed away at such a young age. But I was reading, I don't know if you know, like, specifically, like, how it happened, but I read, like, he died from a subdural hematoma, which means, like, a brain bleed. So I don't know if there was, like, he got in a car crash, or, like, he got hit in the head with something. I couldn't find anything about that. I don't know if they're kind of keeping that under wraps for privacy issues.
They did say in the announcement that they made on social media that it was a subdural hematoma, that they did mention that cause specifically. They did not mention the source or how long that condition had existed in him.
Okay.
But one thing I did see was that there was actually an interview, I forget if it was late last year or early this year. I think it may have been sometime in January or so, but it was sometime in the past 6 months that he won or was presented, I think, some sort of Lifetime Achievement Award, and that he made a comment along the lines of, I'm not sure how much longer I will be around, but I've loved doing what I've done, something to that effect, but that there was a line that in retrospect you look at and say, he knew he did not necessarily have long. So since that was only a couple of months ago, it's not clear, all right, is this a condition that he has been battling for years? Is it one that they discovered in late stages? Was there ongoing treatment? Did something escalate? my guess is they will keep those types of specifics under wraps for privacy reasons. But that they did say the overall cause, and that we do have an indication of it does not seem to have been something instantaneous, that it wasn't likely a car crash that happened the last week of February and then he passed a couple days later in the hospital, that it was a condition that he was aware of for some amount of time, and that's sort of the extent of what I've read.
Okay, that's I don't know, I don't know if that makes me feel better necessarily, but because I was thinking it was like an acute accident, not something like he was chronically living with. Looks like he might have been in an accident years ago.
Yeah, it's difficult to say. It could have been a thing of he was in an accident, 7, 8, 9 months ago, and that it was a condition that that he had the hemorrhaging or damage then, and that was it something they were trying to treat, or did they sort of know, all right, this is going to be an inevitability? So we don't know. It could have, but it also could have been something that that was a longer chronic condition. Things might come out over time, they might not, but like I said, it was it sort of felt like a celebrity deaths don't hit me really, of just the way I am as a media enjoyer, that I have a lot of respect for people, but I'm not someone who's going to necessarily emotionally attach to others. That I'm fortunately I believe myself to be relatively immune to parasocialism in that sense, but that just sort of the magnitude of the guy, and like, oh wow, that like I said, we were fortunate to have him for as long as we did, and that the fact that he did live is it's very important to a lot of people's lives in a very literal sense, not just, oh, he created something I like, but you look at friendships, like I said, careers, jobs, culture, that apparently there were sort of memorials in Mexico of just large groups of people doing a spirit bomb, raising their hands. I saw something of that.
I love that.
Also, like, heck, in a Fortnite lobby or something, and that he certainly touched a lot of lives.
And I'll agree with you. Like, personally, I'm not usually affected by celebrity deaths either. It's like, oh, that's a shame. Like, I hope their family's doing okay. But I think like this was kind of like the first celebrity death where I actually was kind of like, oh, no. Just because, like, personally, he had such a big impact on my life, like, how prevalent, like, anime is to me, and, like, that, I remember, like, growing up and being like, Mom, I really want to get, like, this Dragon Ball Z bedspread, and she was like, no, you're gonna like grow out of this, and like you're not gonna like it in a couple months. Like, we don't want to, like, I'm not spending money on something that you're not gonna like in a couple months. And it's like, nah, Mom, it wasn't a phase. Here we are today, and like, here I am.
Yeah, just Pokemon is sort of my go-to of that, of people thinking, oh, it's going to be a fad. You're not going to care about these cards or whatever in a couple months or something, and here we are 25
Wrong.
plus years later.
Wrong. Right? Now we're getting wacky spin-off of Pokemon with Pal World and such.
Yeah, and just Pal World was such an interesting thing to see, of just, okay, wow, I was almost surprised that we hadn't seen it sooner.
I agree. I kind of chalk that up to people probably tried to release other things previously, but like, I'm guessing there's like a pretty tight lock on the Pokemon franchise where like people just probably get scared that they get sued or something if they even attempted to do something like this. And then like Power World comes out and it's like, I'm pretty sure like lawsuits were filed against them, but
no, they weren't. That Nintendo even released a statement of just like, we are going to protect things and that we will execute legal action where we feel it was necessary. But that was their coded language of saying no, Pal World does not in fact violate our IP. That they can't copyright monster catching systems. That monster capturing in games has existed before Pokemon.
Truth.
And that yes, design-wise, there are some pretty blatant influences in Pal World, frankly, but that Nintendo and Pokemon's swift legal action always happens when someone is using their sprites or using their name or using their terms. That whenever you have like a Pokemon fan game, because it's, like I said, using their sprites, it's using their names, their moves, their city names, their character names, that's copyright infringement because that's theirs. But it doesn't actually take much for artistic differences to go beyond what is copyright infringement, even if there's influence, and it certainly becomes a more gray thing. And that with how swift their legal department is in many cases, the fact that Pal World was able to advertise and see the light of day told me right away, okay, these lawyers already know that they, even if they wanted to do something that they couldn't, or that they don't care and they recognize, okay, this is someone copying us, but there have been imitations of many popular games, movies, other franchises throughout media history. That's just how it goes. And I think you might be right in the sense of maybe people were scared and thinking that they couldn't do certain things when they could. And I almost hope that this will inspire the folks that do these, fan games and ROM hacks to realize, okay, you're doing some really cool game design stuff. And you can do it legally if you have your own assets.
If you're like a little smart about it.
Just make it different enough, make it legally different. Don't use the names, don't use the sprites. That there are some of these fan games that you can take their designs and their stats and everything, and that if you develop just the custom art and assets for everything, that they could then potentially release these fan games legally.
And it was, I don't know, I had a lot of fun with it. Like, I'm glad that, like, it came to, I'm kind of like, maybe this will inspire Pokemon to, like, make some good games.
That too, of just, like, hell, I hope that Pal World does something that, you can bet the Pokemon company's paying attention. And that
sure.
I hope they're paying attention enough to say, okay, people really like that feature. That, or, ooh, we never thought of that thing. The imitation can go both ways. I hope that Pokemon sees Pal World and is like, okay, cool. Someone took all these risks for us and we didn't have to invest any of the time, money, or risk. And we now get to we get to see the results of this is what people liked in a Pokemon-esque formula. That this is an answer key. This is value to them, if anything. That I don't think they're going to put guns in anytime soon, but they can invent, other... Uh-oh, my model froze.
Uh-oh.
You're still here, so you can still hear me, so the stream hasn't died. That's a good sign for starters.
Yeah, we're still here. Oh, there you go.
Oh, wait a second. There we go. Okay, cool.
Yay!
But yeah, they can create slingshots or whatever type of non-realistic weapons or other things to potentially work into their game, or other systems that they might have been too hesitant to actually try because they only release a game a year at most, and that fortunately they're actually ramping down the speed of releases, so that in some ways probably makes them more risk averse, that they aren't going to be as likely to try crazy and different things because they know they only have so many shots. But
that makes total sense.
But if another company's going to do that for them and get the data back for them of, okay, this is what people like.
Then it's like not nearly as risky for them to do it.
Exactly.
That makes total sense.
Are there any Pokemon games, mechanics, or spin-offs, whether they are something from Pal World or something of your own ideation, that you would want to see in a Pokemon game?
Ooh, I never really gave that too much thought. I did like that they gave us guns in Pal World. That was pretty great. Other than that, like, I can't really think of much. Honestly, like, I'm not a huge Pokemon fan. I've only played, like, a few games. My first game that I played was, Sword and Shield. And, like, that's fairly new, I would say.
Yeah.
And then I went back and played, like, Let's Go Eevee, just because it was like, oh, it's basically, Yellow, Blue, and Red, but, like, more current and everything. So I'm kind of like in this realm where I want to go back and play some of the older Pokemon games, do a Nuzlocke run sometime, and just like check out some of the things I missed growing up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that I'm a longtime Pokemon fan. I'm a very easy to please Pokemon fan that, I accept and understand the limitations of practicality in development. Just, when they announced, okay, we're not actually gonna have every Pokemon in every game, I was not up in arms as somewhere that, frankly, I was surprised they went as long as they did without not having every Pokemon. I wish they could be a bit more innovative with things, but like I said, I understand they only release so many things, and that risk aversion makes sense there. I'm glad they're continuing the Legends series, because I loved Legends Arceus. I thought that was, if you want a new and different feel for Pokemon, that was such a breath of fresh air. It was so fun, and just the core mechanics of that game, it was so easy to just lose yourself in that game for a couple of hours.
That's really interesting, because I thought, like, I've talked to a lot of people. I have not played it. But wait, maybe I'm not thinking Arceus. Maybe I'm thinking it's another one that starts with an A. Maybe it is Arceus.
I'm trying to think. A.
It's probably Arceus, but basically, like, that's the game, like, I heard a lot of people, like, kind of give, like, a lot of shit towards, because it was like, this is where, like, they're getting lazy, we want more features, and then Power World came out, and they're like, this is what Arceus should have been, kind of thing. That's kind of like what I've heard other people say. I can't really speak to that because I haven't played it myself.
That would make sense, especially that post-Power World, I can see how people would say, oh, wow, this is some of the stuff that we'd want in Arceus, because it was the open world formula, and it was the first time Pokemon had tried that. Arceus, at least from what I saw, got a pretty strong reception upon its release. Scarlet and Violet were the ones that more recently had a lot of flack at them. But, so that might have been it.
Okay, that makes sense. I don't know why I was thinking Arceus, but...
But it'll be interesting.
Inspiration to play it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It'll be interesting, and we won't really see the results of all this for probably 4+ years, because, whatever they're developing right now, they're not going to be able to just shoehorn in Pal World things as they go, that you'll probably need to wait a couple years. They might start development of a game with that knowledge from Pal World, or with those findings and observations, in the next 6 months, but then it won't actually see the light of day for 2+ years.
That makes sense. Just like, I don't know how game creation goes, but like, I don't know, whenever like a company announces like a new game coming out, and it's like, it's coming, don't worry, it's gonna get released next year.
It is in development.
It's happening, and then I'm like, okay, all right, when are we getting it? All right, Silk Song, come on. Come on.
Yeah. How long has that one been in development for?
Too long. Too long. I don't know. When did Hollow Knight get released? Because they kind of announced
Good question.
Hollow Knight. When did it get released? Let's see.
Hollow Knight was,
2017.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, since
7 years.
2017. 7 years. I'm still remaining hopeful. It'll be fine. It's gonna happen. I understand Team Cherry is like a smaller developing team that is like very particular and like they want the game to be very good. So like I get it. I think it will still happen. A lot of people don't, but I think it will happen.
I'm double checking. Silksong was initially announced on February 14th, 2019. So we are now at the 5-year mark of development. Obviously,
I mean, look at Elden Ring.
Yeah, that you usually sometimes get what you wait for. Sometimes you get Duke Nukem Forever, but that also just had such a checkered development history, being passed to like 4 different development studios that at the very least it's been Team Cherry working on Silksong the whole time. I am confident that the vision and design of that game has been essentially consistent throughout its development, even if it's been a long time, which is usually the more optimistic scenario for extended development cycles, shall we say.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, they'll get there. I believe.
What was it about Hollow Knight, the first one, that really stood out to you? Because I know you do like side-scrollers, but there are many, so why Hollow Knight?
So actually when I was like first getting into streaming, someone in my chat recommended it to me. And they're like, "Oh, you like, like side-scrolly platformers, you should check out Hollow Knight." So I was like, okay. So like I like did a little research and I was like, "Oh, this looks super fun. I really like the animation a lot." And I started streaming that. It was super fun. I was super addicted to it. But it actually came from a recommendation on one of my snoozins.
Yeah.
Yeah. And kind of like, oh, I gotta replay that. Like, that's high on my list to replay.
The other game you mentioned that you're really into is Tetris. And obviously, Tetris, I think that technically, if you count all the different iterations of Tetris, that Tetris is the best-selling game in history. That just, it's had so many different versions released, and that counting all those ones, that it's the most popular game in the world, technically. And for such a simple, elegant game to not only really capture the world, but continue to do so with effectively zero innovation. That there have been some small things in terms of Tetris Attack, but even that system was developed pretty early on. Tetris 99 is just an extrapolation of that there's nothing really new. There's never been, more pieces invented. There's never been, power-ups. It is such a simple game, and yet it remains just a gold standard.
I'm guessing you've played Tetris.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. Mostly because, like, I never really thought of that. Like, yeah, the blocks are always the same. The concept is the same. Yeah, there's a couple spin-offs, but mostly, like, you're trying to achieve the same thing, and it's fun. One of the things that I had, like, a long conversation with someone recently was, all right, this is, like, a 2-part question. What is your favorite block to play with? And what do you think would be the best block to use as a tattoo? I thought that was like a very interesting question because my answers were so different based on like how I play the game and what like I think is cool looking.
So while I do play the game, I'm a very, very casual player of it. I am, passable. I'm not skilled when it comes to the T-block spinning, but I know what T-block spinning is at the very least. And for that reason, I feel like if you were to say what is the most iconic, what would you want to get a tattoo of, that I would get the T-block.
Okay,
nice. It is the most strategically important block in Tetris, I believe. Best block to actually play with, I feel like, is just the L block, because it's simple and it's the one that you use to get a Tetris. That you need an L block to achieve a Tetris.
I feel that. I actually like, is it the L? Or is it it's just like the straight light blue block. Because I like to like, I feel like this is a lot of people's strategy.
Sorry, no wait, yeah, so it's not an L block, so I guess it's a line block, I think, or something?
Line block, that makes sense,
piece,
yeah. That's probably my favorite to play with in the game. And then, as far as like tattoos, I always thought like the dark, I think it's the L, the dark blue L, or is that the orange one? Maybe it's the J block. I like the J block a lot, the dark blue one. I think that would always be like a very cool tattoo to get if I were going to get one. But I don't know. Tetris is just one of those games I'll always go back to. It's like once you have it, it's like, oh, I'll play some Tetris. Oh, I'll jump on like Tetris 99, see if I can beat anyone, get another win. It's just a always go back consistent game.
I know they released a movie, sort of a dramatization about the development and release and proliferation of Tetris. It was sometime last year. It's on Amazon, if memory serves. And I've been meaning to see it, still haven't gotten around to it. I've had the chance to meet very, very, very briefly Alexei Pajitnov, the creator of Tetris, and the guy's Santa Claus. He's just this jolly, happy guy who's just, so tickled that people continue to play his game and that it's done well, and that he runs literally just sort of a foundation that because of how the rights fell out, that he didn't retain normal ownership rights over it, that the man has made plenty of money off of Tetris, that he is not he's not poor off or anything, he's doing fine, but that part of how it all wound up was that he now runs this foundation that sort of stewards Tetris in this sort of unusual way, but that it was a game that brought a lot of people together and sort of unlocked video gaming for a lot of people, that the modern, not in terms of game design, but in terms of cultural significance for anime, or not anime, goodness, video games, that that you have Tetris, and then a bit later on, Wii Sports. That, in terms of like most impactful games of all time, that I don't know if I'd call them like 1 and 2, but they are up there in the pantheon of important games, that just what the Nintendo Wii did in Wii Sports, partially because it was bundled in, but just it being, that very accessible game that you were seeing grandparents play, that, they were using it for physical therapy. It was in retirement homes. There were parents playing games with their kids for the first time, and that you saw that with Tetris, however many decades back, of just people who had never considered video gaming before just suddenly were picking this up and playing it, and there was this whole thing of people, sort of getting addicted to Tetris because it was so fun and accessible and so easy to say, one more game, one more round.
Right? No, I definitely get that. It's just like, I have an hour to kill.
Yeah.
Let me just, bust out a couple games.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool about Wii Sports, though. I never would have guessed that, but that does make a lot of sense, because it was truly like one of the first more interactive games out there that like just anyone could play.
Yeah, and like I said, that it wasn't an important game for gamers. It was an important game for people who didn't yet consider themselves gamers, and that's sort of the difference of it being so accessible, it being something that once people started playing these sports, they then sort of, their minds get open to similar to with beer, that once you find that one beer that you like, that it wound up being, I don't want to call it the Miller Lite of video games, but that it broke through to mainstream and got people that would, if you sort of ask them for a survey, do you play video games? Do you consider yourself a gamer? Have you ever played a video game, that it switched a lot of no's to yeses?
Heck yeah. And super family friendly. And I like how you brought up that, like, parents would play with their kids. Like, that's super cool.
Well, speaking of being able to lose time, that we've gone and blinked, and we're almost at the 3-hour mark already. And
oh, nice.
I know that you do have a busy day ahead of you, so I don't want to keep you too much longer. But I have a couple of last questions that I always ask folks. And the first is, do you have any goals for the rest of the year? That we're, almost, as weird as it is to say, a quarter of the way through the year, 20%, 25% through the year. And that there's a lot that you've already done this year and a lot to be done. So whether it's something in terms of, it could be as simple and metric as follower count, it could be a project that you're looking to do, a type of stream, a game that you're hoping to play. Is there anything that you're hoping to achieve before the end of the year?
As far as, like, streaming goals go, I'm trying to, like, have a schedule where I can stream more frequently. Like, I would love to get back to at least streaming 3 times a week. And, as far as, like, content-wise, I have always really wanted to put out a, like, homebrewing video. And so, like, I need to, like, finagle and, like, figure out how I want to do that. But, like, that's kind of, like, a high priority on my list.
Now, would this be a fully virtual video, in the sense of you would have your model on screen and that you would sort of almost like a seminar video that you would show images on screen and explain the process there? Or would this be similar to an onigiri cooking stream where you might have your model, but that it would be potentially with green screen gloves and whatnot, and actually IRL camera preparing and brewing?
I mean, the goal one day is to definitely get to, like, that onigiri level. I don't have the equipment or setup where I could do that right now. But that is definitely, like, the goal, to be able to live stream that. Right now I'm kind of thinking, like, basically, like, tape a brew day, and then, like, we could either watch it live on stream, and I can, like, explain what's going on as I do it, not in real time, but basically just, like, explain the process and what's going on and everything. And then the other thing I was doing is, like, just starting from scratch, like, on YouTube, and just, like, getting the content and, like, clipping and cutting a video together with, like, the same idea, just not as interactive.
Yeah. I think that would be very cool, and that's certainly not something that I've seen others do. That cooking streams are not as rare as they used to be, but they're still pretty rare. But I don't think I've ever seen someone actually do a brewing stream. That I've heard of people doing, bartending, drink mixing streams and videos, and I'm sure there's going to be brewing videos on YouTube, goodness knows. But I can't think of any VTuber that I've ever seen actually do that as part of their content, stream or recorded.
Yeah, I've never, like, I have seen homebrewing videos, not of VTubers, and they're out there on YouTube. There's, like, quite a few people I enjoy following and, like, watching their stuff. But yeah, I've never actually, like, seen someone brewing a beer on Twitch before.
Yeah, that'd be very cool. And that I do know, like, that Twitch's rules do allow you are able to do that. That they do not care that it is alcohol involved. It is entirely allowed, and it almost makes me surprised that no one has done it, because I do know there is stuff on YouTube. So the fact that no one has actually made the leap to Twitch, my guess is if you search hard enough, there's probably someone on the platform doing it, but that it's not prevalent at all. And unprecedented at the very least in the VTubing space to my knowledge. So certainly of all the VTubers that I know of, that you are definitely the one most qualified to do it, and I think that you would do a great job with it. So I look forward to whenever that may be.
Aw, thank you. That's really good inspiration. So I've gotta kind of like get my ducks in a row and like figure out how I actually want to do this.
Yeah, because certainly that there would be setup involved, and that you just would have a lot of moving pieces. And even if it just becomes, okay, you record it and then you do voiceover after the fact, whether it be you're streaming and doing live commentary or even just doing an edited video, but then having it either on your YouTube or somehow shared on Twitch, that there's a number of different options, and that's sort of, I think that'll be the biggest challenge for you, of just deciding which path you want to take for it. But I think that any of them are viable.
Awesome. Appreciate the feedback. Heck yeah.
And the last question I ask all my guests is, what does being a VTuber mean to you? That's not what is the definition of a VTuber, but different people get different things from VTubing. I've had people say, being a VTuber lets me get in touch with my inner child. It lets me be someone that I can't be in real life. I've had others say, I enjoy my model, I love my model design, but I don't necessarily feel a deep emotional resonance for it. I see it as something I'm able to do to connect with others. It's something that is fun for me to use as an entertainer, but that it might not be that same type of, get in touch with inner child emotional resonance. And those are two pretty distant answers, but there's things in between, beyond. There's no wrong way to be a VTuber. So for you, Lazy Susan, what does being a VTuber mean to you?
I guess the two biggest things being a VTuber means to me, one is community. I love the community that surrounds VTubers and VTubing. Anyone who's a VTuber obviously got into this for one reason or another. So it's already like you have common ground. I just love the community that I have built. It's just amazing people who have come together, who just want to cheers and share a pint and hang out and play video games. So that really resonates with me. And then I'm one of those people on that spectrum that you were talking about. I love my model. I feel like I can actually be my true self while I am streaming. It just holds such a near and dear place in my heart that I can just, be how I want to be. It really allows me to step outside of my comfort zone and just, not be afraid of who I am or my interests.
That's fantastic. And I always ask that at the end of the show because while I never know how people will answer, the answers always make sense. And that for you, for what you do, that it's so clear that you really are enjoying what you're doing. I know that the Snoozens are a very wonderful bunch, that it's always fun to see them in your chat. And for any Snoozens who made it here today, thank you so much for stopping by. I really do appreciate it. I hope you had a good time. And
thank you, Snoozens!
Yeah!
Woo!
And for you, Susan, as well, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here. That this has been so much fun. I feel like we could, potentially nerd out for hours more, but that we're both very busy, and I'm just glad that we were able to have the time we did. The actual last question is, who would you like us to raid?
Ooh,
While she looks around, I'll do some last housekeeping. Dahlia the Weremoth, thank you so much for the follow. Hope you enjoyed the show. For those of you who enjoyed this, that you can follow me here on Twitch and Twitter. It's just Vtuber Talk both places. I do these shows, like I said, about once a week, but I do actually have the rare back-to-back, so I have another show tomorrow at, let me double-check my schedule. I think it was actually close to the same time. I think it was 1 p.m. Pacific, so that would be 4 p.m. Eastern. I will have it posted on Twitter shortly after the show, but that is going to be with Mint Casella. So if you are interested in more shows like this, more talking with VTubers, feel free to follow or drop on in whenever. And even if not, thank you so much for just stopping by today. I think it's here. Yeah, that's about all the housekeeping I have. I don't have much. If you're watching on YouTube, congrats on getting to the end of the video. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. Yay!
Yay! Like, comment, subscribe. Woo! That's great. That'll be a really fun talk show. She's amazing.
I'm definitely looking forward to it.
I can't wait to watch it.
So,
Heck yeah.
Who are we raiding?
Frida Knox.
Ooh, Frida.
Yeah.
And I need to remember because she changed the I and the E. Because for a long time, that she had a chat. It wasn't chat command. It was a chat bot, a reactive, that if you spelled it wrong, it would correct you. And then she changed it. And I forget what she changed it to. Could you please send me her handle in Discord? That way I don't misspell it.
Absolutely. Let's see. There you go.
Okay, because it is I before E now. And
it is.
And that the command was just like E before I, silly, or something like that.
Yep.
Well, yes, so be sure to tell Frida that we all say I, Prost, or send some of Lazy Susan's emotes in the chat. But again, thank you all so much for stopping by. This has been so much fun. Susan, thank you again as well. Everybody, this has been episode 142 of Vtuber Talk. Thank you all again. Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.